and welcome back here to round 4 from the Tata Steel Chess Tournament. Apologies about that, we had some internet issues on site, but we are all back now. And Dania, shall we just jump straight back into the action?
Definitely. Let's take a look at where the games are, and we can maybe start with the game that I think we left off on, which is the Jurriaan van Forest against Magnus Carlsen battle, definitely one of the key games of the day. Well, every game featuring the world champion is going to be a game of the day, but let's take a look at what happened when we left off. So we saw that Magnus had basically traded a lot of the pieces he'd taken on a4, and he had set this devilish trap for Jurriaan if Jurriaan simply takes back on a4. I think this move, queen b3, would have been very nasty, targeting that d3 pawn, and once that d3 pawn falls, then the d4 pawn is a very dangerous pass. But Jurriaan very astutely does not take. He goes instead queen d1, trying to take the pawn with his queen. And after queen b5, he goes knight e4. He finally puts his knight on e4. And instead of rushing to take the pawn, he makes sure that his pawns are protected. That pawn on a4 is basically a sitting duck. So I think he's trying to take it at his leisure. But Magnus, rook to b8 follows, attacking that pawn on b2. Now, I think that we're very, very close to this game just ending in a draw. If Jurriaan takes on a4, after queen takes b2, queen takes b2, rook takes b2, of course, Magnus is threatening a back rank mate. But my guess is that something like this is going to happen, Fiona. And notice that white is now forking. White is now forking the a6 pawn and the d4 pawn, and Magnus cannot defend both at the same time. This does seem like something close to a draw, but maybe f5 is a little bit nasty. Jurriaan does have a couple of things to solve here. Maybe g4 is a little bit more precise here in order to prevent f5. I do think, however, that this game will end in a draw.
I like your suggestion of g4, and this game is very reminiscent of the one that Magnus had yesterday, where he has the tiniest of advantages, but it's all down to his opponent just finding the most precise way to get to the draw.
Indeed, and we saw Jurriaan doing that against Fabi in round 1. He found a brilliant idea, really nothing short of brilliant, in a difficult rook endgame. And I think that we should definitely expect him to find g4 as he plays rook takes a4 quite confidently. He's got a lot of time on his clock as well. So not a horrible result for Magnus. I mean, drawing with black in general, he's often done that kind of thing, draw some games with black, win with white. But although this is a long tournament, at some point he'll need to start generating more chances.
Yeah, he will. Especially, I think in this kind of field, it will take a big score to win the tournament. And despite Magnus saying in the opening ceremony he would rather take 10 points and second place rather than 9 points and first, I still don't quite believe that to be true. I think Magnus, more than anything, wants to win this tournament.
Oh yeah, you definitely want to win the tournament. I think he wants to get 10 points and win the tournament. I think that is the ideal scenario. But we will keep an eye as this game enters what may seem to be its final stage, and we will update you as the queens are very likely to get traded off the board shortly. Let's take a look at some of the other games. My eye is caught by the game of Alireza Firouzja. Shall we have a look at that one?
Because yeah, let's
things are heating up there.
So interestingly, you suggested h5 at some point just before we left it off, and that is what happened. And that pawn is no longer alive.
It is not. And basically, we had discussed that if Ariane takes on h5, that seems inadvisable on account of queen h4 attacking the bishop. The bishop cannot move because queen takes h2 is checkmate. Notice the rook on h8. Instead, Ariane played bishop b3, deploying his bishop, and Alireza goes queen b6. So he doesn't wait around on d8. He uses his queen to pressure that pawn on b2, which has been newly weakened by the development of the bishop. So Ariane defends it, and Alireza plays f6. And Alireza just rips open the position, opens up the center, and tries to get this e5 pawn, which is kind of one of the prides of white's position, out of there. Now, one key idea is that if white plays f4 here, notice that bishop on e3 is unprotected, which means that after f takes e5, f takes e5, I think black can play knight d takes e5. And if you take the knight, then of course black takes the bishop on e3. That's a key detail, which means that Ariane has to part ways with that e5 pawn, and he's decided to do that by taking on h5, now pinning the knight. Black no longer has these ideas with queen h4 because the queen is on b6, but Alireza has taken on e5. And here we stand, very sharp position, Fiona, lots going on. And
Well,
it just looks like anybody's game here.
yeah. Well, my first question to you is, what if I just recapture that pawn on e5, hit your queen, and try and hold on to that pawn for dear life? Is there any way?
No, that's definitely, I think, very sensible. And one idea that came to me as I was meditating on this position is, well, if queen c7, then definitely I think f4 makes a lot of sense. And even here, I mean, I don't think that Alireza needs to do anything immediately. I think he can just develop and perhaps castle and get his bishop out to c5. The thing is, black is down a pawn, but that material advantage in such a sharp position isn't really felt. There's another thing to notice here, which is that the long-term weakness of the h file could give black this long-term attack. Black could develop his bishop also to e7 and then consider doubling rooks on h8. So I don't think Alireza should fall into the trap of assuming that he has to attack fast here. But another idea after d takes e5 might be to go queen to d8. And this is probably very dubious, but I thought it might be an interesting idea to go back to that old idea of getting the queen to h4, which I would agree is not kind of as dangerous as it used to be, because here white can take on g6 and then go knight f3 and defend h2. But perhaps getting that bishop is a win, a small win for black. So several things to decide here. I think Ariane is quite likely to take on e5, although he can also prioritize his development with something like knight d2.
A final question before we move on. If he takes on e5, is a bishop c5 another option for black?
Definitely. No, that's the first thing that I was going to suggest, and that's definitely a good catch, developing and defending the queen. And after bishop takes c5, I would imagine, well, I mean, actually knight takes c5 is possible as well, but queen c5 looks quite sensible just to keep the d7 knight on that square to attack e5. And maybe, well, the problem is white can't move the queen. I would love to play the move queen to d4, but we can't forget that the bishop is hanging, and I really don't want to take on g6 either. So absolutely, Fiona, I think that's very much possible in response to DE.
Yeah, a lot of things to consider here for Ariane Tari. We will leave him to it, but we'll keep a close eye on the game. Shall we check in with Fabiano Caruana and Hari Krishna?
Sure. Yeah, that's a game we haven't checked in on in a while, and 21 moves have been played. So we had checked in when Hari Krishna had gone bishop to e3 in this kind of sharp Archangel Rai Lopez. Fabi, we remind you, could not have taken on e4 because of this move d5 that would bring a lot of black's minor pieces under fire and win a piece. So Fabi takes on d4, he trades pawns, and he goes knight e7.
By the way,
very interesting idea.
Sorry, Dania, because I see that we have the Jurriaan against Magnus game, so we are looking at the Hari Krishna against Fabiano. But we have Jurriaan on camera. Has he played? I think you suggested. There seems to be a pawn on
actually
g4,
all of this has happened. Yeah, all of this has happened. Queen b2 takes stakes. Now the key move g4 stopping f5, and now of course rook b6. Magnus preserving the a pawn. Rook takes d4 and king f8. And this is definitely equal, the tiniest of edges for black. Literally the tiniest, because black has the slightly better pass pawn, and bishops are generally better at supervising pass pawns than are knights, but that is a one darn good knight, and it's basically unassailable for the time being because f5 is impossible. Rook d7 comes to mind. Generally in these endgames, rooks belong behind pass pawns, so that's one idea. But that's definitely not the only one. And the computer
he has
doesn't seem
just
to like
played
them.
it, and just as you said it, the rook
Okay.
went to d7.
So for some reason, the computer isn't a huge fan of it, but I'm not really sure why. I mean, this is such a tempting move. Getting the rook behind the pass pawn, making sure that passer doesn't run all the way to a3.
The only thing that I was wondering about is, could I have used, well, I guess it's passive, but could I have used my rook to block your pawn from a4? Is there any way for you now that the rook has gone behind the pawn, is there any way black can get the pawn all the way to a3?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly an option to consider. I mean, I think Magnus's idea in that case
not
would have been to
necessarily
slowly bring the king
immediately,
in.
just to
Maybe make a general
keep an eye
improving move.
on that square. I'm just
Yeah,
trying
maybe
to
you could have just not
understand,
moved the pawn.
what's wrong. What's wrong
No,
with knight d7?
I think that's definitely possible. You
47.
could just not move the rook at all, because as you say, the rook is restraining the pawn and not allowing it to move to a4. So maybe you could have focused instead on getting the king involved. I think that's certainly would have been a sensible alternative. But rook g6, I think Magnus has immediately spotted the reason why the computer didn't like the move rook c7 and what a tricky move Mr. Carlsen has just made on the board. I actually completely missed this. He's just attacking g4. And guess what threat he's renewing? The threat of f5, not f takes g5, but the threat of f5 is now once again very, very strong, and that would win a pawn.
And the problem is that if we play f3, f5, and we try and defend with knight f2, there's still bishop c5.
Indeed. And this might actually be the lesser evil for white, because what you can try to do here is use the knight as a bargaining chip, right? All right, you can take my knight and get the extra pawn, but endgames like these, as the old adage goes, all rook endgames are drawn, but this one is definitely drawn because the king is too passive, it's cut off, and the extra pawn is just not going to make enough of a difference. But I have a feeling that Jurriaan might have missed this move, so he still needs to demonstrate quite a bit of precision.
Yeah, and Magnus, unsurprisingly, finding every single trick there is in the position, he will find it. And some more work to do here today for Jurriaan. I guess we both agreed that the position is still in drawish waters, but gonna have to be precise.
Yeah, and that is just an incredible talent. Game in and game out. It's never easy against Magnus. And it really just never is. And so far, it's not that he's been unlucky. I mean, his opponents, particularly David Anton, Ariane Tari, they deserve full credit. They defended like lions. They were just unwilling to yield a single inch. And Magnus, I think, has really done his best. He hasn't played badly, but some of these lines just haven't gone his way. He just hasn't manufactured quite enough chances, Fiona, to really get under his opponent's skin. But maybe this game will signify a change. We'll see.
We will keep a close eye on it. Let's go back to Hare Krishna and Fabiano Caruana.
Absolutely. So we join here with Fabi taking on e4, going knight e7, and really trying to get to that pawn on e4 with his fianchettoed bishop and his knight. Hare Krishna going knight b to d2. Once again, the pawn is indirectly defended. So if you take on e4, then I believe that after takes, bishop g5, you can notice that the bishop pins the knight, the rook attacks the bishop, and if black cements the bishop with d5, then among other things, I think that bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, and probably not the best, but at least something like this would win the pawn back with some interest. There is, however, probably a more accurate move, maybe knight to d2. But yeah, knight to d2, and once this bishop collapses, that pressure down the e-file would be way, way too strong. So Fabi refraining from taking the pawn, going knight g6, and Hare Krishna going d5. They trade bishops. The idea of d5 clearly to shut this bishop on b7 down, and Fabi says, nope, that bishop is not going to be shut down. It's reopened, but it reopens at the cost of this d6 pawn now becoming a little bit weak. Hare Krishna dropping his bishop to c2, and okay, before grabbing space on the queen side, and now Fabi going knight h5. So how should we understand this position? I think there's a couple of things to pay attention to. This move, knight h5, I think Fabio actually wants to attack on the king side. I think he wants to go queen f6, and then he wants to transfer that knight over to f4. That's a pretty significant square, and he's going to have incredibly active pieces. Look at the pressure that he's exerting also on the e4 pawn. And that pawn on d6, while it is weak, I think it's very hard to actually attack it for white. If white can move his knight, let's say, to b3. But I don't really see how you pile up on this pawn. And I don't see any good prospects for this knight. I think black is slightly better, Fiona, and rook a3, knight f4 played.
I mean, at first sight, of course, you would tend to, if you just look at the pawn structures, you see, well, white only has 2 pawn islands, black has 3, so you tend to just think, okay, I take the 2, but the more I look at the position, yeah, the white pieces are just struggling for good squares, and all the black pieces are swarming in.
Absolutely, they really are. And another problem is that it's easy to play this position for black. Black's get all of these very natural improving moves. And that's a very underestimated factor, in my opinion, in certain positions. It's not only about who's better, it's also how easy is it to play. If you look at Hare Krishna's position, you can totally imagine white collapsing really, really fast. But black is all these moves, queen f6, rook c8, you can play rook d8, d5 should be considered. So Fabi's position is not only slightly better, but I think easier to play. The one Positive for Pentala is that he's got an hour on his clock. That is a lot of time. So he really can invest quite a bit of time to finding, I think, the most accurate defensive moves. One thing that comes to mind is beefing up the security on the king side with this typical maneuver, 2G3. That might be one way to throw some water onto the fire, but we will see.
I have one question. The bishop on b7, for now, okay, it's doing a good job looking then at the pawn on e4. Is there ever any way we could bring it back to c8 and eye up the pawn maybe on h3 in some lines?
I really like that idea. I mean, I think particularly in the event of the queen being on f6, even in this position, bishop c8 should definitely be considered. And I think that's part of the reason Pentala played rook a3. It's to indirectly defend the knight so that after knight takes h3 check, like let's say the queen moves away. If the rook was not on a3, then this move would be absolutely devastating because the knight would be hanging. Nonetheless, an idea like this always should be considered. I mean, sacrifices along these lines should never be ruled out. So absolutely, I think that's possible.
I like Fabiano's position. I mean, what was it? It was Kasparov who said something about the knight on f4 or f5, right?
Well, there's the knife f4 concept. But yeah, I think a lot of things have been said about those knights. They've been, romanticized and they're the stuff of legend, but for very good reason. The knights on f4 and f5 are almost always incredibly dangerous.
For sure, and there we see our 10 players in the tournament. Don't think that was quite the plan, but we love these shots, so why?
Yeah, we do.
Why not?
Absolutely. Why not? No, they're great. They're great. We need to display them.
We warned you yesterday. Yesterday we warned the headphone users. So you should have taken our warnings.
R.I.P. headphone users. Right. But that is a great graphic, though. It's very professional, and I know that there have been a glitch here and there, but I can attest to the fact that the production has been absolutely top notch. Our team working very, very hard behind the scenes. Problems do arise as they do with any complex production, but I have to tip my hat, and I would encourage everybody to do the same. This has really been awesome.
Absolutely. I mean, they've been so hard at work. I can testify here on site. They're working from morning to evening to bring you this show. So a big shout out to our producers working tirelessly behind the scenes. Shall we move on to from this one and go?
Absolutely, yeah.
Can we please go to Donchenko?
Okay, sure. Yeah, let's go to, and queens have been traded. Okay, so what happened here? Now we looked at this f4 knight d7, and actually the funny thing is Alexander continuing not to castle. I was really expecting him to castle, but instead he drove that pawn into f5. You can see that limits the bishop on c8. Now it really can't ever develop to e6, but it is a committal move. Right now he can't really open up the f file anymore. And so now it doesn't make as much sense to castle short. One of the ideas of castling short was to put a rook on f1. So the way that the queens are traded, knight d6, queen c6 check, right into the teeth, in amongst the trees, and queen d7, queens are swapped. That doesn't really diminish the sharpness of the position. It doesn't mean that the kings are saved. And Donchenko going b3 to limit that knight, not allow it to go to c4. g5 by Radek, trying to close down the position. I think he is preventing white from playing the move g5 himself. Kind of interesting. And here, finally, Alexander castles long. It's kind of ironic that he waits until the endgame to do it, but I think it does make perfect sense. Radoslav continuing to shut down the position. And look at that exquisite positional maneuver by Alexander. Basically, just he has that pawn in his crosshairs. And one very sensible idea here, I think, is to double rooks and continue to attack that pawn. And that might be a mistake because of d5. So perhaps you should start here with the move knight c3, limiting the progress of the pawn, and then try to double rooks. White is definitely in the driver's seat here, no doubt about it.
Yeah, it very much feels like a position where white is playing 4-2 results. Unless he does anything too crazy, the king side is completely closed, and he is the one with the control in the center and on the queen side. So I'm sure Alexander Donchenko will be happy with how the opening stage played out here.
Yeah, he is. And by the way, another idea in terms of preventing d5, because allowing d5 would just enable all of black's pieces to come out. That is out of the question. The move bishop a5 is also possible, attacking the knight and trying to get that knight out of b6, because that knight is one of the key pieces that is preparing the move d5. Without it, that becomes harder. So several ideas to consider here. Knight c3 appears to me to be the most sensible move.
He has just
But
played it.
okay, yeah, knight c3, stopping d5, and then of course he can double rooks. I think Radoslav will make the draw here. I really don't think that he's significantly worse. I think one thing he can do is just go king f7 and say, all right, I'm going to put my rook on d8. Yes, this is passive. Yes, this is nasty. But I really don't see how Alexander is going to really make inroads into black's position. I think he's played a good game. Not sure he's going to bring it all the way home here.
Dania, I'm seeing in the chat people are informing us an exchange sacrifice has occurred in the Firouzja game. So we shall return there.
Wow. Okay. So things really heating up here. And Ariane deciding in this position to go after that light squared bishop with the move g4. And the whole point is that the bishop actually doesn't have any squares, because in the event of bishop takes b1, queen takes b1 follows, and that knight on g6 is simply toast. That knight is lost. But Alireza had cooked up a very interesting idea. Rook takes h5, sacrificing the exchange, as you said, for the bishop g takes h5. And look at white's king. White's king is incredibly exposed. And the second thing is this bishop on f5 finally, after a lifetime of insecurity due to this g4 move, is finally safe. It is retired to a beach in Hawaii. It is just safe on f5. And that white king, it might not seem like a significant weakness right now, because once again, the queen is quite far removed from the king side. But after something like knight h4, maybe even knight f4, black is going to castle. And we discussed this. This queen can re-enter the king side very, very quickly via d8. Yeah. So this is anybody's game. This is incredibly unclear. I love what Alireza is doing here.
I really do too. And I think especially over the board when you see rook h5 appear, I think it's like, oh no. Did not want that.
No, I think Ariane saw it, but I think he might have underestimated some of black's play here. But the time situation, after only 13 moves, Fiona, 40 minutes for Alireza, this is going to be another time scramble, as we see knight f4 has indeed been played. Now a decision to make for Ariane. Does he take on f4? Does he play d takes e5? This does not win the knight, because Alireza has, among other things, the move knight h3, and then he can deploy his queen via d8.
And Alireza, I mean, after the positional masterpiece we saw today he's showing us, guys, I can still play in tactical, aggressive style too. So showing us the whole spectrum.
Yeah, versatility is the name of the game. And at such a young age, Alireza already capable of playing such a wide range of positions and such a wide range of openings. That is just an unprecedented versatility, unprecedented skill. He is just so promising and so fun to watch.
Yeah, and while we see the bar actually here says a very calm and collected 0-0-0.
Of course.
I very much like Alireza's chances. I think from a practical point of view, I think most of us would prefer playing with the attack, but especially Alireza.
No, for sure. And this is an exchange is not that's not a huge amount of material. It's very significant, but it's not the sort of thing you do and you have to checkmate your opponent in a couple of moves. So we will monitor how this attack unfolds. But anything else that's catching your eye, Fiona? Anything else that's been interesting to you?
Maybe we can go back. I feel like we haven't looked at Maxime vachier-lagrave in a long time.
I agree. Let's take a look at the game. So we remind you, a martial attack as MVL deploying his rook to e4, trying to smoke that queen out via h4. David Anton going back on his own volition. I think this is still theory, though. Basically, what David Anton is doing is he's trying to launch a battery by playing bishop f5, and he just wants to win back the d pawn, because why not? And after knight f3, a slight change of plans. Bishop f5 would meet with knight h4, very nasty little move, eliminating the bishop. So now the bishop develops instead to g4, pinning the queen. I think that's a very good move. Very good presence of mind for David and flexibility. Maxime urgently gets the bishop out of g4. He sacrifices a pawn to do so, and he does play this move, knight h4, getting his queen to h5, trying to, wrest the initiative from black's hands, trying to get his pieces to the king side. Things heat up here. David goes g6 and queen e2, queen g7, ghettoing his queen, leaving open that f6 square potentially for the knight. And after bishop e3, knight takes e3, queen comes back to f6, and rook e1 leads to the position currently on the board. So David has won the pawn back, Fiona. And I like his position. I think after something like, you can go bishop d7 and rook e8, or did I just blunder something? I think, queen d4 here. Oh, that's a cool move. That actually wins the piece.
Oh, wow. That's such an easy to miss move.
Yeah, it is. Queen d4, just forcing the queen trade. You wouldn't think it's
yeah, so we have to be a little bit careful.
Yeah, I suppose g4, by the way, is not, for some reason, I thought it was a threat for a second, but it leaves the knight on h4 unprotected. So David Anton has time here to make an improving move. Maybe you want to start with the move rook a to d8. Maybe you want to move the king somewhere to maybe g7, getting it out of the pin. I kind of like that move as well, just so that there are no tactics related to that f7 pawn being pinned.
How big of an advantage do you think the bishop pair is here for black?
I mean, it's quite significant because the position is relatively open. I would argue that, this knight on h4 isn't as bad as perhaps it may look. It does open up the possibility for various tactics in the future. That's why king g7 would be one of my candidate moves. And what I like about Maxim's position is that he has tripled on the e file. So that's why I wanted to play bishop d7 at some point. And David definitely has problems to solve here. The eval bar liking black's position, I do as well from a static point of view. But dynamically speaking, I think MBL still has a small initiative that needs to be dealt with.
I mean, it could just be a case that both players are happy with their positions. Maxime, you just mentioned it, the word dynamic. I mean, Maxime is one of the most dynamic players at the top. While David may be a bit more, slightly more classical style. So yeah, I think both might just be happy with their respective positions.
Certainly, yeah. I would say that the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think equality is probably the most sensible assessment here. Dynamic equality, as David, with an hour on his clock, plenty of time, and that's the perk of playing such a theoretical opening. You get to make a lot of moves fast and really accumulate a lot of time on your clock, and that goes for both players. But David with an hour on his clock to ponder this critical position.
Shall we go back? There's two games I feel we haven't seen in a while. I'll let you choose where to start, the Yesipenko Grandelius as well as Duda Giri.
Well, let's check in on jan-krzysztof's game. First, we had this very theoretical Grunfeld, where we remind you Anish sacrificing a pawn to get this active play for his pieces. And queen c7 has indeed been played. Bishop d4, rook d8. You can see that black is deploying all of his pieces to active squares. And now the move knight to g4, of course, threatening checkmate and basically forcing the trade of bishops, leaving white with this slightly awkward knight on a3. We had mentioned before that the knight often wants to come into the game via c4, but currently that square is covered by black queen. Here, bishop b6 is a potential threat. Giri going rook a c8. He doesn't care. If bishop b6, I think queen takes c3 creates a lot of counter threats, in particular against white's
rook. Can we just
so that's out of the question.
Go down this line, actually, after bishop b6?
Sure. So if you take the rook, right, it makes, white's won an exchange, but black takes the queen, and then it's very important to take that rook on a1. And after rook takes a1, rook takes a8, technically material is equal, but you can see how bad white's pawn structure is, and that knight on a3 is just horrible. This is just not a good position. And if white tries to capture on e3 first, which is perhaps a little bit more sensible, and at the very least, black can recapture with the bishop. And once again, we get a similar type of position. White's pawn structure at the end of this line is not ruined, but the knight is still very bad, and black controls the d file. So black is definitely calling the shots here.
By the way, just to address a very quick question in the chat by Hoba Johns, how does the tournament format work? Just round robin, and whoever has the highest score at the end wins. Yeah, it's as simple as that. Everyone plays 13 rounds. There we have it. So 14 players here. It's single round robin. Everyone is going to play 13 rounds. Nobody's going to get eliminated. And whoever has the most points in the end wins indeed. Actually, I've been put on the spot by myself. I think in case of a tie, we'll have a playoff, but maybe our producers can confirm that. Yeah, so that is confirmed. I would love
Nice.
to. I would love to see
Me
a
too.
playoff. Always so exciting.
I love playoffs. I just love playoffs. And I've been present for several of them in US championships, live tension in the room. As we talked about, you get nervous on behalf of the players, but that's far in the future. We have so many rounds to look forward to. And that's what I love about chess. Simple format. You don't have to read a pamphlet of rules. It's just so intuitive. Player the most point wins, 1 point for win, 0 points for a loss. Now we can get on with the game. So Duda went e5 here to shut down Giri's bishop. Look at this bishop on d4. That's like Atlas holding the world on its shoulders. I mean, it really has to keep everything protected here. Queen c6. Finally, Duda gets to his knight, deploys it to c2, and now to b4. So he activates it, and Giri goes queen e4. This is the position on the board. I feel like this is going to fizzle out into a draw. I still feel like Black's got super active pieces. White does have an extra pawn. White can snag another one with knight takes a6, but this would be inadvisable. If we notice, rook and the knight on the same diagonal. And does Black have a light squared bishop? He certainly does. After queen takes c3 and bishop d3, that forks the rook and the knight. So this would be inadvisable. Duda has taken the queen and instead gone rook f to e1. I would say that maybe he's got a slight edge. I'm not sure Black has quite enough for the pawn, but I do think that Giri will hold his own here and make a draw.
After rook e1, the rook has now left that dangerous light square on f1, which means, well, I'm going to ask you, does it mean you have to go back to b7 and defend the pawn on a6?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, I just don't see, like, if you go bishop f5, it's not that this would be the end of the world for Black. I just don't see a reason to allow this, particularly because the bishop on b7 is perfectly well placed. I mean, it's on the long diagonal. It's well defended, and a move has been played, and it is indeed bishop b7. The one thing I would point out is that Duda can go perhaps rook a to b1 and try to bother that bishop when he moves the knight away to d3. But we could play a5 here, and we might see something like this. Knight to d3, bishop d5. The bishop once again re-centralizes itself. I think that's a likely course of events here.
Do you still stick with your previous evaluation that
Yeah.
Black is fine, but still has to, find some very precise moves?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's accurate. I think Black has. It's not the sort of position where you need to find only moves, but I think Giri does first of all need to be careful not to lose this pawn, and he also needs to be careful to keep his pieces active. I think his compensation hinges on his rooks remaining active, and the pressure must be kept on the c3 pawn. You can't let White reorganize his pieces and consolidate the advantage. It's always dangerous to be down a pawn in an endgame. Let's make no mistake.
I have another question. Could it be an idea for White to play maybe rook a to d1 and try and push e6 at some point?
That's a really clever idea. I like that a lot. Rook a to d1. And that may force Black to play e6 himself. But that does create a weakness on f6. I know that may not seem significant, but one could imagine a future where like the knight could reshuffle its way to f6. So I think that's a very sensible idea, which could at least face Giri with an annoying decision whether to allow e6 or to play e6 himself.
Well, we're going to let Jan-Krzysztof do that, think about his option. And while we do that, we're going to take a quick look at his portrait, which was filmed just before the start of this event.
Yeah, I'm very happy to play here in Vachier-lagrave again. It's a very strong tournament. I mean, has always been. And yeah, happy to be back. Yeah, my preparation is a bit, like not full, but yeah, I have prepared some new openings and stuff. Yeah, but the most difficult is actually to get adjusted again to playing chess over the board. I think I've played twice in the A group, in the Masters group, and once in the B group. It was back in 2014. Yeah, nothing has changed, and it's very, very nice that, despite the pandemic time, it's like almost the same. Yeah, one needs to be, fit because, yeah, tournaments last so long, especially this one in Vachier-lagrave. It's 13 rounds, a lot of time. Yeah, and the games are very demanding, so, yeah, yeah, to be, you know, in a top of such tournament, one needs to be mentally strong because, you know, it's not for everyone. It's an advantage to be fit in serious chess. So I think everyone does it, and maybe not so much, not so many people talk about it, but they do for sure. Yeah, actually this year I don't expect anything. I set any goals for myself, and just will enjoy playing here.
Jan-krzysztof, who is very happy to be back here in Vachier-lagrave. I mean, I think for every grandmaster, you are always so happy to get an invite to play here, but that's especially true this year with so few tournaments being played over the board right now.
Absolutely. This is just such a coveted tournament. I think you hit the nail on the head. You know, it's rare to play any over-the-board tournament, and Tata Steel has that incredibly prestigious ring to it, and for very, very good reason. This is an unparalleled tournament, and it's kind of thing that everybody looks forward to every single year.
Indeed, and how lucky we are here to be calling the shots and taking you through the action. Shall we go to the... Well, I see you've opened Esipenko against Grandelius, which is perfect. And a lot of Niels Grandelius fans in the chat actually asking how is Niels getting on. Let's just get the portrait away, and let's see how Niels is getting on.
Sure. I mean, he's getting on well. I think he's solved some of his key opening problems, and essentially, let's just see where we left off. So b5, so queen d3 was this interesting move, and Esipenko potentially trying to get his queen to g3. Niels played b5, which is kind of this very classic Najdorf move, also establishing the stronghold for his bishop. If Esipenko had decided to play f5 now, then bishop c4 would almost certainly have followed, and then d5 can come with great effect. Esipenko decided to centralize his knight. Niels kind of ignored it for a time, and then he plays e takes f4, knight f5. I mentioned this idea. This is one of the most, I would say, fundamental Najdorf ideas, getting that knight to a very, very strong square. And the point is that this queen, maybe Esipenko here started to regret putting the queen on d3, because if he now shifted to g3, well, that's out of the question, because knight takes d4 would just win, at the very least, the pawn. Esipenko had to offload, dump some fuel, so to speak. Knight takes c7, and that's a win for Niels. That knight on d5 was very strong. Esipenko had to give it away, push the queen back. And now Niels, a very nice move, queen b7, activating the queen, attacking the pawn on e4, now forcing the knight back. And now Niels goes rook c8 and puts even more pressure on white's queen. So you can see that black is definitely calling the shots. He's got excellently placed pieces. Andre's really only advantage is that he's got the two bishops. But I'm not quite sure, Fiona, that is a particularly significant thing here. I definitely prefer Niels' position.
Yeah, I agree with you. Rook c8, well, the rook is also being placed on the same file as the queen, looking down at the queen on c2. Is black's next idea to play b4 and try and chip away at the pawns?
Absolutely, b4 is among the ideas that black has. This all really depends on how Andre chooses to play the position. Andre could also punt and play h3 and kind of see what Niels wants to do and maybe try to meet b4 with c4. Mm-hmm. Although I mean, this doesn't look safe at all, that this pawn is weak, and one just gets the sense, if that makes sense, that something about white's position that's very flimsy. Even like knight takes c4 has to be considered in these kinds of positions. There's tactical ideas, there's positional ideas. Niels is doing a fantastic job so far bouncing back after definitely a painful defeat yesterday.
Yeah, and I always think it's so important before the rest day, and maybe you can tell us a bit about your experience. It's so important before the rest day. You don't want to go into the rest day with a loss.
Oh, your results on the day before the rest day completely defines your rest day experience. And when I played in the Netherlands, whether or not I was going to make a day trip to Amsterdam during the rest day depended entirely upon one thing, and that was whether I would at least draw the game before the rest day. Amsterdam is such a beautiful city after a win, and really your tournament experience and in my experience, the way that you perceive the location that the tournament is in, whether you think a city is beautiful, depends in large part, not entirely, but in large part, on your results in the tournament. And the most beautiful cities I've ever visited were those that were associated with a good tournament.
Well, thankfully, we have 3 rest days here. So if they were to lose today and ruin their first rest day, they still have 2 more shots after that.
Yeah, and I mean the bliss of winning a game and then having a rest day. It's you win a game, and I don't have to wake up early tomorrow. I can just sleep, and you wake up. Oh, I won the game before. That's such a good feeling. As Andrei Sapenko trying to prevent Niels from continuing the initiative, going bishop g5, threatening to take on f6. Of course, so Niels can go knight fd7 and then sort of perhaps regroup, redeploy that knight to b6 or even to c5. That's really not a problem. And Black's position is so solid. Look at how every piece is defended by at least one other piece. That's kind of a big deal because it really makes it hard for Andre to make any sorts of inroads here, Fiona, into Black's position.
Yeah, and I think Niels is going to be very, very happy here with what he's got. You know, all his pieces, as you mentioned, are on active squares, and we'll come back. We'll come back to this one, but so far, looking good for Niels Grandelius.
Indeed, it is. And when shall we go next? There has been, let me just check. There have been a few developments in a couple of the games. Now, first of all, if we can quickly update on Van Forest against Magnus. And Magnus has succeeded in getting a position where he can torture Van Forest for about 50 more years. Now, what's happened here? We joined Fiona after this very devilishly tricky move, rook to g6. And Jurriaan kind of yielded. I mean, he gave up the pawn. And what he managed to do here, he did win the a6 pawn. Magnus, using this overextension technique, look at this maneuver. Rook h4. All right, get over here. All right, get back here. Rook d4. Now it wins the pawn. If you go rook d4 immediately, then king e2 would defend the pawn. But look at how he overextends the king. Now this pawn cannot be defended because a3 is protected by the bishop. Jurriaan has to part ways with the pawn, and you get this 3-on-2 knight against bishop position. Now, and Magnus, the torture has begun. Yeah. This is a draw. This is 100% a draw, but hard. Mm-hmm.
If it were a pure rook ending, so if the bishop and the knight came off the board, I think it would be fairly straightforward. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yeah. If you swapped these two pieces, maybe Jurriaan should just take them off the board. All right, I'm announcing a trade. It's like, that would be kind of funny if I don't know if the game Monopoly.
Yeah.
But I don't know how popular it is in Europe, but it's like offering a trade. I'll give you, give me Boardwalk and Park Place. I'll give you, and my brother used to do that all the time when I was young, and I would always take the money over the properties. Be like, I'd give you $500 and I'll give you this Monopoly, and it was the worst Monopoly. Just give me Boardwalk, the most expensive property in the game. But it would be funny if in chess you could do that. You could just offer a trade of pieces, just to give me the bishop, and I'll give you my knights.
I would love to see Magnus's face if Jurriaan took his knight and just went before the rook was on a6. If let's say the bishop was just defended, just went knight f3, takes bishop on f6. That would make for a good shot for us, at least on camera.
Yeah, the knight would acquire superpowers indeed. And why? And it might be worthwhile. Some people might be wondering, why is it that this benefits Black? Well, first, it's just another piece on the board. So just by definition, it makes the position a little bit more complicated. But in addition, Black does have this ultimate plan of basically pushing his pawns. And you might experience a situation. Let me just make a couple of random samples. Let's say white does nothing and just allows Black to push the pawns. What you will see eventually, first of all, the knight has to become passive. And after something like rook b2, if there was no bishop, then it wouldn't be a problem. White would just shuffle his king around. But now you can see that bishop d4 is a very serious threat. And if white loses a second pawn, that's going to be losing. So this is definitely a draw, but Jurriaan is going to have to be on his heels for a long time, as time control already made. Look at a lot of time, though, to defend here.
Yeah, I think he's still facing down a very unpleasant defense here. Actually, also, let's remind everyone, even if he holds, the unpleasantness isn't over just yet for the day. The players, as soon as they finish their games today, will have to undergo a COVID test. There will be one test before every single rest day, so the unpleasantness never ends today.
It doesn't, and unfortunate necessity. And it's really a treat. We've said many times the fact that this over the board tournament is going on is an incredible opportunity for the players, and I just wish them the absolute best of health, and hope that this goes by without a hitch.
Indeed. I mean, I really think we're quite, maybe just a word here on site. It feels very safe. We're almost like in a small bubble. There's no outsiders coming in. Not only the players are being tested, the whole staff, all of us here in the studio were tested this morning. They all came back negative. So far, so good.
That's fantastic. No, great to see. Like so much care being taken, and I think that speaks to the competence, incredible competence of the organizing crew. And I know that firsthand, knowing some of these people involved. They are excellent and professional individuals, and you can see the organization of this tournament always on time. Great shots of the players, and this makes my job quite easy.
Yes, it is indeed a pleasure to be a part of this wonderful tournament. And Dania, where do you want to go next?
Well, let's take a look. So let me see here. Well, okay. MVL against Anton. Something very interesting has happened. So first of all, David has indeed played King G7, which we had discussed, getting the king out of the pin. But now MVL goes G4. So I had mentioned this move almost jokingly, and I had tossed it away, thinking, well, this gives up the knight. But I think MVL has cooked up a very interesting idea. And this idea might be, I think it's to play G5. Okay, so now this exposes the attack on the queen. Once the queen moves away, if the queen moves to H5, I don't think that's Black's best move, but we'll get to that in a second. MVL goes Queen D4 check, and he picks off the bishop on D6. He wins back the bishop. Although the eval bar actually doesn't like that move. I'm not sure what it is that White can do other than Queen D4 check. I mean, he is that. It might be Bishop D1. Oh, that's it. It's Bishop D1. Bishop D1 actually kind of traps the queen, forces Black to give up his bishop in order to secure the H2 square. This leads to some very, very complex tactical possibilities, Fiona. So
Yeah,
very interesting idea by MVL.
I'm actually struggling to. This is so complex. Okay, I think, did we have a couple more moves in the game or no? Because we're gonna have to slow down. And,
yeah, this has happened.
Okay, this just happened. So let's take a minute, and maybe you can talk us through these lines one more time, because
sure.
Very complicated stuff here.
Yeah, so how should we break this down? Well, first of all, it's important to go in order of priority here. The queen is hanging. That is an indisputable fact, and that is what Black should start with. The queen is hanging. That must be remedied. Now, Black has several ways that he can go about defending the queen. And in general, there's, I think, 3 ways of defending against the check and 3 ways of defending against an attack. You can move the piece in question. You can move the queen. You can take the piece that is delivering the attack. So in this case, you can take the rook, but that doesn't seem like a very good idea. Or you can intercept the attack. And that third option is what players often miss. And in this case, the move Bishop G4 will have to be considered. So Queen H5 is the most straightforward way of defending the queen. And that is the only square to which the queen can escape. If you take a look at the queen, it doesn't have many options. But now I believe that Bishop D1 will follow. This actually does trap the queen. The queen has no more squares. And in order to evacuate the queen, Black's only option is to play Bishop G4, jettisoning the bishop. But the point is that after Bishop takes G4, if you notice this bishop on D6, it is securing the H2 square. So Black can evacuate the queen to H2. This may seem almost winning for Black, but if you take a closer look, that queen is essentially stranded on H2. So yes, White's king is very weak. Yes, it's under attack, but at the same time, it's a double-edged sword. That queen could very easily get trapped. So that's one option. And if we go back, the other option is to play Bishop to G4 in this position. And now MVL himself with several options. Queen D4 check seems to be the most tempting. Checking the king and actually forking both bishops. After King G8, MVL has to decide which bishop he is to take. I'm not sure straight off the top of my head, but Queen takes D6 does look quite good because this keeps the G4 bishop pinned. Which of these 2 moves will David Anton play? Queen H5 seems to be the easier one to calculate, Fiona.
If you take on D6, there was the G5 pawn not hanging.
Well, I think the idea is if you take on D6 and I take on g5, I think I can drop the queen back to g3
And
and pin your
me
bishop.
again.
Right, and it never ends. These complications never end. And now I play f3, and I think the bishop is actually lost. You can't move the bishop because the queen is unprotected and pinned. So very complex lines to calculate for it. I mean, that's not even the only possibility for MBL. He can also, of course, take the other bishop. And if we go back to the other line, queen h5, the other move that must be calculated is queen d4 check, and he can certainly take the other bishop. But this, I think, is easier to deal with because David can just take on g5, and due to the threat of checkmate, he forces an endgame where David will be up a pawn. It is true, however, that white does have control of the e-file, so some compensation here for Maxime.
I see a question in the chat by Jens. He's asking, so when the bishop is on d1, if bishop h2 check, king h2 and bishop g4 is an option.
Ooh, well, I think the really cool thing is white can play king h1, seeking shelter behind the two bishops. What a cool idea. And once again, the queen is trapped. Here you don't have a way to move the bishops around to deliver a discover check. Black is still not entirely lost. You can amazingly play bishop g4, bishop takes g4, and you can finagle your way here into an endgame with bishop f4 check. Now both queens are hanging. Bishop takes h5, bishop takes e3, but this is certainly not what black wants, because after rook e3, g takes h5, white is most certainly in the driver's seat. But yeah, bishop h2 check would definitely be possible, but I'm not sure it's effective due to this nice retreat.
King h1 is a nice resource. Indeed.
Yeah, so after king takes h2, just to show the idea, now bishop g4 check loads up the battery on the bishop. Oh my god, Fiona, but even here, can you go king g3, bishop takes d1, and rook h4? And once again, the queen is trapped. Once again, black has no choice but to force an inferior endgame with queen f3. Everything is captured, and white's rooks are more active with this pawn clamping down on all three of black's kingside pawns. So not to shoot this bishop h2 move down. I think it's a very sensible resource, but I do think that white has an abundance of options against it.
Yeah, I mean, we see David Anton there on camera deep in thought, and a couple of people have gathered around the board to see what's going on in this very interesting battle. Shall we leave him to it and come back to this game in a little while?
Absolutely, we shall, and we will keep an eye on it. Now, let's see where else we can go. Maybe the Danchenko game, because there's been some updates. He has won a pawn, actually, but at quite a bit of cost. So what Radek did here is we joined when Alexander was trying to pile up on that d6 pawn. And basically what we predicted, king f7 happened, rook d2, doubling up the rooks. Oh, my apologies. And doubling up the rooks. But Radoslav, instead of doubling himself and going for the passive defense, we talked about this. He goes rook a8, and he tries to get counterplay on the queen side. I really like that idea. Rook d1, and he just says, yeah, take my pawn. And now what he does is he advances his pawn to b4. He occupies a lot of space on the queen side. And after this mass trade, takes. Notice that the move b takes c3 here would meet with rook d6 counterattacking the bishop. So that would not be possible. But king e7. And now Alexander plays knight d1. So what is black's compensation? Well, if you notice these pawns, first of all, Radoslav could go a4 and essentially just start attacking on the queen side, but he doesn't even really have to, Fiona. I think that the position is so locked up that even if Radoslav were to play rook d8, and I'm not saying that's the best move, but even if they were to trade rooks, I really don't believe that white's winning chances are all that significant because of the activity of black's pieces and the weakness of the pawn on e4.
So how would black hold here? And let's admit the rooks came off the board after rook d8 and swapping. Okay, white would have to at some point push, make a pawn break on the queen side. So yeah, let's say c3. And I guess you would just sit, or...
Yeah, that's a good question because, well, one idea to me would be to transfer the knight over to c5 and pile up with everything you've got on that e4 pawn. So something like cb, ab. And then the key question would be if you, let's say, bring your king up to e3, and a move has been played, we will update you in just 1 second. I don't really see a way to make inroads for white because that knight on c5 is fully limiting its vis-a-vis on d1. And if knights...
Yeah, no, sorry, I let you finish this this variation. I was
were you going to ask if the knights were to be traded here?
Yeah, instead of bringing my king to d2, I was wondering if I brought the knight to f2 and then to d3.
I would just go knight c5. That would
And I
preempt you
can,
from
yeah,
coming
of
to
course.
d3. But I agree. If you manage to make it to d3, white can actually win on the spot because he would win the pawn.
Yeah, no, I don't have, not in time.
But knight d1. Oh yeah, no, Radoslav hasn't made a move. Sorry.
Tricked us. Yeah, so 91.
Yeah.
For some reason, I don't think we're gonna see rook d8. What? So what about the immediate a4 for black?
Yeah. So a4, I suppose, is very sensible here, and if I think knight f2 is probably Alexander's idea. I mean, he still does want to get the knight to d3, rooks or no rooks, and if Radoslav takes, then after c takes b3, notice that the rook on d2 is defending the a2 pawn. So the battle will begin to revolve around whether the b4 pawn can be kept protected.
Yeah.
But before we delve further into the analysis, we have a short announcement as we're going to show a tweet.
Yes.
And really the tweets add so much spice to this tournament, Fiona, don't they?
So a tweet from our producer here on site, and we are calling for all of you out there watching us. Do get involved in the Twitter sphere. Probably not with the same content. I hope most of you did not have to go through a negative test today, but congratulations to Bigfoot on your negative result. But use hashtag Tata Steel Chess to get in touch with us, and you might find your tweet on the big screen as well.
Absolutely, and great news. Our wonderful, hardworking producer, Bigfoot, without whom none of this would be possible. He is, as you said, together with his amazing team, working tirelessly to make sure this production runs as smoothly as it has. And will Black's defense run smoothly here is the key question for Radoslav Wojtaszek as he ponders several defensive options, which include a4 or rook d8. So, your Vic is being really modest to us in private correspondence. I think
we're working with what we're getting. Okay,
yeah.
Shall we smoothly move on to the next game? I see in the chat people are asking for Firouzja. Did we have any moves there?
Are you saying the game wasn't smooth enough? I mean, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to win a piece at the opening and take the game all the way to the end? Is that how you play a smooth game? Anyways, I had to make that reference given the word smooth.
It is still one of my favorite videos. I mean, I love Maurice.
Yeah, we all do.
It's such a funny video.
No, it's just sort of a classic, and this has nothing to do with any of. It's just sort of a classic. But in any case, we have a very interesting situation here in Ariane Tari's game. We remind you that Firouzja sacrificing the exchange with rook takes h5, deploying the knight to f4, and then to h3. So, and then playing c5. So very interesting way of defending the queen, Fiona. I think the idea of this move is to open up the c6 square for the queen. Why is this square good? Because that from c6, it actually has a direct line of fire to that king on g2. Amazing. f4 by Tari. Queen c6 indeed has been played. Knight f3 trying to cover up that diagonal. And of course, Alireza castling long here. He has to tuck his king away. Knight bd2, and we have this position on the board. Now, the computer seems to believe that Black's attack is quite devastating here. A big time advantage for Black. Now, there's several ways to go about this. I think the simplest is to go bishop e7 and then to go rook h8. But I have a feeling that there is something better in this position.
Can I just ask you, Dania, quickly a question from the chat from Raman James? Can Ariane still win?
I mean, absolutely. I think we should not put too much faith into just the computer's evaluation here, because this is not kind of like an end game for Magnus's game where they're playing for 2 results. They are absolutely playing for 3 results here. Without a doubt, this is a very hard position to navigate accurately, although Alireza is known for his ability to do just that. But definitely, any result is possible. I think, particularly given the time situation, 26 minutes for 22 moves, anything can happen here. And I say that without any reservations. This next couple of moves, they are going to be crucial, as Alireza apparently has a very, very strong option here, which we are trying to decode.
Yeah, so let's try and see why the computer seems to think that -2, I mean, -2 very close to a winning advantage. Yes. What could that move be?
I've been struggling to find. I mean, I've had two main ideas. One of them was to play the move d4, c takes d4, and we've seen Magnus do this against Firouzja. You basically push up a pawn, and then you carve out the square in front of it. So knight b6, knight c5. That's one idea. Although the problem with this is that it opens up the c file, and that has to be dealt with. I mean, like rook c1, for example, and that queen then becomes pinned. So I'm not sure that's the best. But you know what is always possible in these situations is to interchange the move order, play knight b6 first, and then prepare the move d4. Here, this is a little bit less committal because black doesn't have to play d4 in the event that white does something nasty. So maybe knight b6 is a little bit more precise. But other than that, the only other idea that I came up with is the move g6. And the idea of g6 is to get this bishop out to h6. And clearly this is bad, but I thought about attacking the f4 pawn, maybe getting the rook to g8. So,
and what about just a simple move like bishop e7, trying to get the bishop out of the way and opening the way for the black rook?
No, certainly that's, I mean, that I think is there's nothing, this can't be that bad. I mean, you get the rook into the game, and I think practically speaking, black's got a great position here. It's easy to fall in love with the eval bar and say, well, this isn't the -2 move, but I think Alireza shouldn't get. Also, remember, nobody's tapping Alireza on the shoulder and say, hey, Alireza, -2. You better find the move here. So he might very well play bishop e7, and I don't think we should judge him too harshly if he does.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, this game, all three results still possible, and the time situation. This is one of the games where we're gonna see some action coming in thick and fast at some point. Let's leave Alireza to it for now, and let's go back to the game between Yesipenko and Niels Grandelius.
Well, things continuing to look quite grim now for Andre as he loses a pawn, and after bishop g5, knight fd7, or no, he actually doesn't, but rather the position opens up, and d5, it actually almost looks like he's down material because look at how active black's pieces are, and Niels, just an excellent decision to put that queen on b7. He couldn't have known entirely that he would eventually build up a battery against the g2 pawn, but that's exactly what he's done. His pieces amazingly placed in the center. Andre's pieces, on the other hand, kind of scattered around the board. Generally speaking, it's a good idea to have the two bishops in an open position, but there are exceptions to the rule, and I would say that here, because the knights are so nicely centralized, Niels is, without a doubt, he holds a clear advantage. Andre has to play this very, very carefully, Fiona, to preserve something like a balance.
Yeah, I mean, I like black's position. My question to you is, the position looks so nice, but how do we go on about improving it from here?
Well, I think, like, first of all, you know, we have to see what white does, and I think something like doubling rooks on f1 looks relatively sensible. I mean, you want to employ all of the pieces for the defense. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not easy because if only you had a third light squared bishop to put somewhere on c6 and it's actually two further, that would be amazing. Maybe something like knight c5 and then knight e4 makes some sense, or at least just hover on c5 and eventually go out to d3 if white relinquishes control over that square. So I do like knight c5 as one possible idea. You can also throw in, flick in h6 there just to make some luft for the king and ask the bishop a question. So a couple of options here that Niels will have to work through. But Niels is just, he's playing so well, even despite the loss, Fiona. I really like the way he's playing.
Yeah, and let's remind everyone that despite the loss, he's still part of the leader group, big group at the top, 5 players on 2 out of 3. And while, actually, let's wait. Yesipenko is about to make a move, and it is indeed rook af1.
Indeed. Oh, rook, or is it rook g1? I think it's rook g1.
I watched it on camera and I thought he had stopped on f1, but no, he went one step further.
That's not a move you make if you have a good position. Rook g1, trying to get that pawn on g2 under full control and maybe free up the other rook. I still think knight c5 makes a lot of sense here. And rook g1, rook f1 are kind of similar moves. I think Andre was just worried about eventually that pawn falling should the rook on f2 need to move. So we will see how Niels goes about playing this position. But shall we have a look at Niels's portrait? He's such an interesting character.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see what Niels had to say ahead of the tournament.
I did prepare for the tournament, but my invitation was quite late. It was on the 23rd or something like that of December. So last couple of weeks I've been preparing extensively, but before that it was sort of general chess training. So I'm hoping it will help. As a kid, I played in the C group in 2010, and then I saw the A group sitting next to us and so on. Since then, I really wanted to play in the A group, of course. In general, I thought it was not unlikely, let's say before the Challenger last year, that one day I would play in the A group. But I did not expect it to be this soon. I think the pieces still move in the same way as they did before, but no, it's a matter of the very long games and the concentration required. And I mean, it's very different from playing, 40 blitz games online where you can lose a couple and it doesn't matter. Like when you play a classical game for 7 hours and you lose concentration for 5 seconds, it could mean the loss of the game. Most days I will try to run on the beach or do some exercises and so on, hoping that the weather allows it, of course, which is always a bit unclear here. I think like when you start to focus on the next game, it helps with dealing with the loss. Yeah, I mean, you no longer think about what happened before when you have a new game. The tough thing is when you don't have a new game to look forward to. Then it can stay with you for quite some time. But once you start preparation, it's all fine.
And despite 2020 having been such a tough year, thankfully the pieces still move in the same way, Daniel.
Absolutely, and yeah, Niels is awesome. I'm a big fan. I'm just a big fan.
I actually remember, he referenced that tournament in 2010 when he was playing in what was at the time called the C group here. It doesn't exist any longer. Now it's just the Masters and the Challengers. I was actually in university studying in France at the time, and I remember driving up here to Weichensee with a friend for a weekend, just as a chess fan, to come and see the action. And I remember Niels very well playing in the C group with his dreadlocks, his infamous dreadlocks.
That was 2010. That was so long ago. I was like 11. He's so experienced too. I mean, it's crazy when you think he's still very young, still has the peak of his chess career in front of him, but so much experience under his belt, playing these high-level tournaments, and that really matters. I think that matters more than some people realize, because you just get a handle on how to do things, how to prepare, how to surmount losses, how to play long tournaments, and particularly playing in Tata, I think really helps subsequent performances.
Absolutely. And let's maybe just remind people one more time for those who haven't heard it yet, but Niels, one of the members of Team Magnus for his last 2 World Championship matches, and that experience also, I mean, it's not like you join Team Magnus and that's it. Like, that will pay off, for years to come. You will be able to use the knowledge you gained there.
Absolutely. That must be such an incredible experience to be part of the greatest chess player in history and his team, which of course is very extensive and is held to the highest of standards. And, Niels holds himself to the highest of standards, which makes perfect sense. And that has reflected in his results this tournament as he nurtures and tries to expand a big advantage against Andrei Esipenko in the middle game. He's gone rook e6, lifting the rook up potentially to g6 or doubling rooks. That's also a very sensible move. He's pressuring white on really all sides of the board. All 3 sides of the board are, one can think of, in black's favor. Andrei pretty tied up here, but we'll keep monitoring how he defends in this position.
Absolutely. I saw a question in the chat. Did Magnus lose? Magnus certainly didn't lose. He is still playing. He's playing for 2 results. Let's see if he's making any progress.
Yeah, so he's, lots of shuffling. We can just see, I'll just click the arrow button a couple times. What this reminds me of is almost those bullet games where you're basically pre-moving and you're trying to catch your opponent's rook pre-move. You're hoping he pre-moved rook a5, but of course that's not what they're doing. Or is it? But finally we have king f6. I think that it's really a question of time. The only possible way that Magnus could really make progress is to play g5 at some point, and then to play h5, g4. Now, whether or not this leads to a win is a moot point. I just don't see any other way that he could trick Jurriaan in this position, but maybe he's trying to tire Jurriaan out first. And then when he's exhausted from making all of these defensive moves. At that very moment, he plays g5. Magnus is, of course, the ultimate master of sensing his opponent's weakness.
Actually, let me ask you one more question, Daniel. So earlier I asked you if we could swap the rook for the bishop. Well, the not the rook for the bishop, sorry, the knight for the bishop, then the rook ending would be a draw. What about if the rooks came off? Would that make White's defensive task easier or harder?
That's a great question. I think it would make it easier. And one thing to notice is that in the middle game, you know, these pawns on h3 and f2, you would look at them and say, well, they're weak. These pawns are weak. They're isolated. In the end game, these pawns are actually one of the greatest defensive structures that you could have, because they're kind of, you know, like bumpers. They're stopping, this h3 pawn is stopping black from playing g4 very easily. That's like the first line of defense. And then this f pawn is the second line of defense. Once black's pawns infiltrate the fourth rank, and they will suffer some losses due to the h3 pawn, they will suffer even more losses once they reach the second rank. So if you swap rooks here, I think that the knight and the pawn would combine and basically force black to trade off all three pawns. And then when black has only one pawn remaining, of course, the knight can give itself up for that pawn. So I think, I'm not entirely sure, but I think that that's the right kind of logic to assess the knight versus bishop endgame here.
Also, one final word about this ending before we moved on. I still have, you know, memories from commentating here in Weichensee with your good friend Robert Hess last year. And Robert trained me so well that even here I'm already spotting that were it to come down to it, that h-pawn
Nice.
is the wrong color.
If we notice the bishop and the pawn, that's a great point. And this square, what kind of color is it? It's a light colored square. Bishop is dark. And so that would be a draw. Great point.
Shout out to Robert Hess.
Indeed.
Okay, let's move on from here. Maybe.
So
I'll let you choose.
So first of all, just a quick news flash in a couple of games. So Alireza did indeed play the move knight to b6 here, which we had discussed, kind of eyeing the idea of d4, knight d5. Tari going queen e1, and I think the idea of this move is to protect the e3 bishop. Why is that significant? Because after d4, cd, knight d5, Ariane does not no longer has to worry about his bishop being hanging. He can redirect his efforts on defending f4 and protecting his king. So Alireza decided not to hurry. Bishop e7 has been played, and rook c1. Once again, Ariane continuing to discourage Alireza from playing d4. So rook h8 here seems like a very sensible move. That's one possibility. Alireza could also try to move his king out of the way. I know that seems a little bit slow, but I certainly think that Alireza should try to make sure that he can set himself up for playing d4 at the right moment. So that's what has happened in that game.
It will be fascinating to see the next few moves here. This position is gonna, it's going to explode, you know, over the next few moves.
Without a doubt, and the time situation is going to serve as the gasoline, because 22 minutes to 25 minutes, that's nothing, absolutely nothing in a position of this complexity. So we'll keep an eye on this one.
Indeed. Shall we check in maybe with, oh, well, let's go to Donchenko, where you were correct and the rooks have come off the board.
They have, yep, rook d8 has been played. He's decided on this move. I think Radoslav is determined that this position is going to be a draw, and I don't really blame him. I think he's probably right. And just to recap, you know, what it is that black has to be careful about as king e7 is played on the board. White's only way to make progress is to cut into this pawn chain. And white can do this in two ways. White can try to go c3, of course, after preparing, or white can try to go a3. And it makes sense at some point, either before or after knight d3, to play king b2. And I think what Radoslav is basically saying here is that if he puts the bishop on b5, for example, after a takes b4, a takes b4, I think it's just a fortress. I mean, knight d3 is actually a very bad idea. Black is perhaps winning here if he gets the king to d4. So I think Radoslav has done the necessary calculations and determined that Alexander will not be able to make progress here. And I think that's a very sensible belief.
I agree with you, Dania. Before we move on to the next game, maybe we can very quickly bring up the standings. I see a few people in the chat have requested a look at the standings here so far. So that's after 3 rounds. We currently have 5 players in the lead, Dania.
Yeah, we have a major situation going on at the top with 2 points out of 3. And I think after this round, we'll definitely have some decisive games. We'll definitely have some clarity, I think, going into the first rest day.
We will indeed. And let's see, let's check in with a couple more games before we go on a quick break, a quick final break before we get to the nitty-gritty of this first time control.
Indeed, and maybe we can, I see some requests in the chat to check into the Duda Giri game, which reached that end game. And it's funny, indeed, Rook AB1 played, and actually, so Rook FE1, Bishop B7, Rook AB1, and now Giri did play E6. Fiona, I think your idea of white going E6 definitely played a role in that decision. And I think we talked exactly about this scenario as Duda trying to exploit the weakness of the F6 for, I think he is trying to bring his knight to E4. But my inclination is that Giri will just take that knight on E4, and then Giri will maybe try to trade off the other pair of bishops. Still white is up a pawn. And from a purely principle perspective, black shouldn't trade pieces when he's down a pawn. But the situation is different here because black has such piece activity that maybe trading this bishop will open up the floodgates.
Jan-krzysztof has not gone to E4. He has just snapped off the pawn on A6.
I mean, why not? But Giri, I think, will take on A2. So this isn't technically a second pawn sacrifice. No. I actually forgot that pawn was hanging, to be honest. I think knight E4 in light of that would not have been a great idea because of bishop takes A2. I think this is heading toward a draw.
So this one might end peacefully, but still a little bit of defensive work ahead for Anish Giri. Shall we go maybe to Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and David Anton?
Yeah, let's see what decisions were made in that game, and decisions that I think benefits. It's not entirely clear who. So we remind you this G4, Queen H4, G5, and David has gone Bishop F4. So he's gone for a third way of intercepting the attack on his queen. And again, Rook F4 would be senseless because of Queen takes G5, Maxime going Queen takes F4, and they trade queens. The situation fizzles out, the smoke clears. David plants his bishop on this outpost on F5, Maxime activating his rook, and David going C5. So I think optically it looks like white's better because white does have the more active pieces. But I do think that this rook on F4 is very nicely limited by the bishop on F5. It really doesn't, there's no way to dislodge that bishop. There's no pawns with which to attack it. David, I like this move C5. Kind of limiting the pawn on T3. And once he brings his rooks into the game with rook E8 or rook D8, I think the position is probably equal. And it seems like to me that this is going to somehow fizzle out into a draw, which would be, of course, a very successful result for David Anton.
Yeah, and we see Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, the masked fighter.
Yeah, he's going to, nope. You could see him kind of hesitating, making motions, but deciding to think for a little bit longer. And
he's actually, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave is, from what we've seen from the cameras, I think the only player who often, he doesn't wear it at the board all the time, but most of the time. Let's remind everyone, it's not compulsory. So everyone has to wear masks everywhere, except for within that playing area. The players don't have to wear the mask.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and definitely, I'm sure the players are being as conscientious as they can. As Maxime deciding to take a little bit longer to ponder his next move, there's a couple of options here. He can sneak his bishop into D5, and he can actually try to orchestrate the trade of bishops here. I think that does make some sense, but it probably does lead also to a draw. So we'll keep an eye on that one.
We'll keep an eye on that one. Dania, shall we take one quick break before we get down to that? That's all. I think always the most thrilling hour before 5 and 6 p.m. Here, local time, when we get to that first time control.
Absolutely, and when we come back, we'll check into Hare Krishna Caruana. We will keep an eye on Tari against Firouzja, and all of these scintillating games that are now, as you said, Fiona, reaching their most interesting stage. We will be back in a tizzy.
Welcome back to round 4 here at the Tata Steel Chess Tournament. And Dania, let's go straight back to the games because it looks like Magnus might have missed a little something.
Yeah, this game is going to end in a draw very shortly. And the reason is that Magnus, and we talked about it, I mean, his winning chances here were not extensive, but they certainly were also non-zero. But here he plays the move bishop d8. The intention behind this move is completely understandable. He tries to go bishop b6 and rook d2, targeting that weak f2 pawn. But I think he missed, well, rook h7 is sensible, and I think he can still save that pawn on h6 by playing either h5 or maybe even king g5, and he continues to torture white. But instead, a move that I simply cannot fathom, rook h2, and he simply allows Jurriaan to take the pawn. I mean, that is just crazy. And I think what Magnus originally intended, maybe something like king g5, but now the move knight f3 check forces an immediate draw. And that's not even the only move. Jurriaan can also move the rook up because, of course, white is going to take the rook and the players can agree a draw. What else could Magnus be intending here? Maybe the move king to g7. Once again, after rook takes g6, king h7, it looks like white loses a piece. But the move knight f3 comes to the rescue and forces the immediate draw. Magnus missed something, but long story short, if Jurriaan takes this pawn on h6, I believe that will make a quick draw. There might be maybe king f7, maybe what Magnus can maintain some chances, but I highly doubt that this game will last for more than a couple more moves.
And we see Jurriaan there. I think he is going to take on h6, but of course he's checking, double checking, making sure that he hasn't overlooked the trick. But we also saw him give that quick stare, that quick look at Magnus, like, what are you up to? Like, what is this move?
Magnus, did you miss something? Yeah, and he definitely did. And yeah, there must have been some sort of neural misfire that occurred with rook d2, which is understandable. I mean, Magnus is human. He tortures people in these kinds of endgames so well, but occasionally he will take his foot off the gas pedal, and that appears to have been what happened here. So and we will keep an eye on whether he takes.
Well, he has just taken. We had the close-up camera there on Magnus, and Magnus immediately goes king g7.
Yeah, that's a draw. Rook g6 and knight f3 is going to be. We can just keep on this game because Jurriaan is about to take on g6 and go knight f3, and he just did. And then Magnus will play rook takes f2 and offer a draw. And Jurriaan has got to be happy. I mean, yes, he's playing with the white pieces, but nonetheless, I mean, any draw that you can get with Magnus is just a good result, and that really puts the pressure on Magnus. He basically has to win every game. And that's not a practical, expectation to have. But Jurriaan holding his own early in this tournament, very solid chess.
Magnus not offering a draw, though. He just took on g6. So we're going to wait. I think Jurriaan goes, okay, king g2. I thought he was just going to go and try and... Oh, actually, did I find a losing move, Dania? Was
knight d4?
Knight d4 was losing, yeah?
Knight d4, bishop b6. I think it's still a draw after king e3. But barely after king d3. This is barely a draw. King h4, king e5. This is actually kind of interesting. And king g5, h4. So white does draw even after king d4. But Jurriaan escaping the pin, f4 knight. Yeah, okay. So they are going to have bare kings on the board any second now. And just a great, and this will be the first game to conclude as Magnus. This move, rook, where was it? Rook, it was a little bit earlier. Okay, rook d2 itself, yeah, that's the move. Bishop d8 was fine. Rook d8 was very odd, just giving up the pawn and Jurriaan counterattacking the rook. And now they will sign the peace accords any second now with the kings on the board.
You could see, actually, there the little smile of Jurriaan. And as you said, I mean, every draw against Magnus is a good result, regardless of what color. And it's been a very solid start to the tournament for Jurriaan. Magnus, on the other hand, though, is not going to be a happy camper going into the first rest day.
No, he's not. And definitely, he is going to be, knowing Magnus, not that I know him that well, but he's definitely going to be kicking himself for not at least generating more chances in this endgame. We can go back to that moment when it appeared that Jurriaan might have made a serious oversight, rook d7, allowing rook g6, and all of a sudden Magnus targeting this pawn on g4, Jurriaan is deciding to give it up and in return to win back the a6 pawn. But this 3-on-2 is something that can be tortured for a long time. So Magnus will be disappointed in himself, but at the same time, only 4 rounds in, Magnus with a +1 score. It could be worse. And he is, at the very least, not going to be far from the lead, Fiona. So everything is still ahead for the world champion as well.
Well, shall we see, have a look at the other 4 players in the current leaders group and see if someone's gonna take advantage of Magnus's draw to pull clear? Maybe starting with Niels Grandelius, who we thought was doing so well. So the 4 players we're keeping an eye on are Niels Grandelius, Anish Giri, and then the remaining 2 are facing each other, Fabiano Caruana and Hari Krishna.
I think Niels is the likeliest to, and okay, maybe closely followed by Fabi, but I think Niels is the likeliest to win his game because we can see the 2 demons facing Yasipenko. First of all, a very bad position as Niels continues to accumulate the pressure, and knight on e4 is going to be quite devastating, or knight g4, all of this coming in, and Yasipenko on top of that in pretty acute time pressure. So what kind of defensive resources does he have? Well, I think he can take the knight. I think that makes some sense. And then perhaps come out to g3 in order to lend some further support to this bishop on e2. But then Niels can double rooks. Again, Niels is very easy play here. He has a lot of healthy moves that he can play to save some time. And we will keep an eye on Andrei's defense here. But things look rather grim for him, I have to say.
Yeah, and I mean, his task is not being made easier by the fact that he only has 17 minutes here. We're only on move 23, and then, yeah, that's getting to that dangerous territory I was talking about. 17 minutes for 17 moves, at least for me personally, whenever I drop on the clock lower than the remaining number of moves, that's where not quite the panic sets in, but I think, okay, better hurry up.
No, definitely. You get that heaviness in your throat, and it's like, oh God, am I really? Because the moment you're faced with a complicated calculational task, and you've got 5 minutes for 7 moves, I mean, you just could be busted. I mean, there's just no way that you can solve all of your problems playing only based on intuition. It isn't a blitz game, and particularly if your opponent has a lot of time. So Niels not with a lot of time, but 21 minutes here is a lot better than 17 minutes if you're in Andrei Yasipenko's shoes.
We just had a move. What did he?
93.
93.
Okay, that makes sense. Getting the knight involved. Now, he's not stopping 94, but I guess 94, well, 94 looks very tempting, but I suppose rook f1 is what Yasipenko intends. And Niels would not want to part ways with this bishop. Not that the 2 knights would not be able to carry the burden of the position, but I do think the bishop is kind of the glue piece that's keeping a lot of the pressure going. So bishop c6 appears sensible.
Oh no, sorry, no, I was hallucinating. I was so focused on checkmating on f2 that I thought knight g4, but g4 is not just covered once but twice.
Yeah, but I mean, you can try to sneak it in there. Maybe
but
you could go 95
so much
to f2.
wanted to get to f2.
No, I mean, maybe you could just move the knight straight up and bishop e4. So he reserves that square for the bishop.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we just see Magnus getting ready for an interview there. I have to say, I'm surprised that he's even stopped for an interview because I have seen him rush past me plenty of times. So I'm very curious to hear what Magnus is going to have to say, and here he goes.
The annoying thing for me is that I feel like I made some crucial little mistakes in each 3 games at right at the end. Like I've not been able to put maximum pressure right at the end in any of the games. Now, having said that, I don't think like I had any objective winning chances in any of these 3 games. So in the sense, 3 draws are an absolutely normal result. As I said, like I feel like if I'd been a little bit more precise in those games that I might have broken through in one of them. But overall, it also must be said that my opponents are defending well, and especially in those black games like Jurriaan played very solidly today. He didn't really leave any doubt as to what his intentions were, and fair game. That's his choice.
And is it your opening preparation that is giving you too little chances in the middle games?
I don't know, to be honest. Like today, I tried to play something unusual, but I guess it's in the nature of the game that you can still be solid with white. Like clearly he only needed to make common sense moves in order to get a decent position. But nevertheless, like at the end, if I don't blunder, then I probably don't win the game, but I at least get to torture him for a long time, which is at least something.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Interesting there, Danya. What did you make of it? Almost sounded like a little dig at Jordan's playing so solidly with the white pieces.
No, I mean, I think he's right. I think it cannot really be disputed that Jordan initiating a lot of the trades in the middle game kind of didn't mind a draw. But at the end of the day, I mean, who can blame him? And that's just part and parcel of being the world champion. I mean, it's not that anybody starts from move one and says, I just want to make a draw. That's not really how chess works. You can't announce your intention and then will a draw into existence. It takes accurate play. At the same time, you can also understand Magnus's frustration because, he drops a lot of rating with every draw, and it can be tough to try to manufacture winning chances every single game against players who are kind of insisting on trying to dull the game down with the white pieces. So, it's not about assigning blame. Nobody did anything wrong. We can understand Magnus's frustration. As he mentioned, lots of these small inaccuracies that are a bit uncharacteristic. But I also think Magnus, he's respectful toward his opponents. He doesn't seem, very angry, nor should he be, because he's got a +1 score. He's poised. Probably will not be tied for the lead since somebody is likely to win, but he will be very, very close behind going into the rest day. So no reason to worry for the world champion. I think he's played solid chess, maybe a little bit below par, but we have every reason to believe that he will improve his play and be a contender for the lead going forward.
Speaking about someone being likely to win, great segue. Let's go back to the game that we were just looking at. Niels Guandelius with the black pieces against Yesipenko. If Niels can win, he will be one of the leaders going into the first rest day. He could potentially be joined by Anish Giri, by Hari Krishna. Well, it's a lot of ifs, actually. I'll stop right there.
Well,
Let's first let Niels see if he can convert his advantage.
I think there's reason to believe that he will, because Yesipenko now with 9 minutes on the clock, if the transmission of the time is accurate. Now, Niels going knight to g6. You can see the mobility of his pieces, and you can also see how flimsy Andrei's minor pieces are. If he plays bishop g3, well, then the knight on e3 is very undefended. It sits under the x-ray of black stroke. Niels could increase the dial even further by doubling on e8. And just to show an example of one of the things that could happen, if Andrei moves this rook, let's say from f2, then bishop takes g2 check would come in. If you take with a rook, then the knight is gone. If you take with a knight, well, then black takes the bishop, and black is an absolutely crushing position here. So I wouldn't say that Andrei is losing, but it's definitely getting hairier by the move.
And that time situation, he's now approaching the territory where he only has 1 minute per move, and that's not a territory you want to be in, especially when you're, on the defensive side of such a difficult position.
Indeed, and bishop g3 is his move. I'm kind of expecting Niels to double rooks. That's a pretty simple move, and it can, once again, put the pressure even further on Andrei to figure out a way to stay alive. We will definitely monitor Andrei's defensive efforts, but shall we have a look at Firouzja's game? I think that there have been some interesting developments there. Okay, so Ooh, yeah, this does not look good at all for Ariane. None of these developments positive. So we remind you that Alireza played knight b6 here, eyeing the idea of d4 knight d5. And now Alireza very patiently developing his bishop, and boom goes the dynamite. He decided that this was his best chance to play d4. One very important thing to notice, you might look at this and say, well, wait a second, isn't he, as I had mentioned, Ariane was trying to discourage him by playing rook c1. It's like, please don't play d4. Okay, but you'll get pinned. I mean, you don't want to play d4. No, that's it. I'm not listening to you, because that bishop on e7 is defending the pawn on c5, which makes it essentially impossible that white will ever take on c5 with a rook. White can take on c5 with the pawn, but that's absolutely not a big deal. This ain't about pawns. And Alireza very calmly putting his knight on d5 and taking on f4, crashing through the gates here. This is looking worse and worse. Ariane trading off a pair of knights, but now this knight from f4 can go on to d3 and fork the queen and the rook. Now, it is very important not to fall in love with material here. If you do that, then you might end up relinquishing some of your key attacking ideas here. I think that knight on f4 is worth its weight in gold. So my intuition is telling me not to play knight c3, but instead to find a different way to accumulate the pressure. What exactly is this way? Maybe it's a move like bishop e4, putting pressure on the knight. Maybe it's something as calm as rook h8, bringing in the rook. Maybe it's even rook takes d4. That is another tactical idea here. Because this is impossible either due to queen g2 or even elegant with knight h3.
Very nice.
This will not happen in the game.
What about bishop? Oh, sorry, I was thinking of bishop h3.
Definitely possible. That looks quite sensible. And now rook f2 knight d3 could be an even stronger fork against the queen. But I feel like an Alireza move is to take on d4.
D4, yeah.
And what Ariane can try here is this move knight a5. And the way that this should be thought of is I'm trying to get your queen off of this diagonal so that I can take the rook. But there is just no way that this is going to work. I mean, with such an abundance of pieces, there's just no way. Even something as simple as queen d5 preserves the queen on that long diagonal. So super tempting, but Alireza continuing to think here. 9 minutes for 16 moves.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, the clock situation in this game, it's already looking precarious in the game we just came from. But here, I mean, 12 minutes to white against 9 for black with still 17 moves to make. We'll come right back to this game, but let's just see a quick tweet by Grandmaster Jonathan Tissel saying Firouzja's ability to inject brain-bending complications into positions is amazing. Very hard to study and emulate, but worth trying, or just watch and enjoy. Hashtag Tata Steel Chess. Keep the tweets coming. We love to hear from you. Dania, what do you make?
I am just going to watch and enjoy, I think. But Jonathan Tisdall, yeah, I've heard a lot about him. He's a great commentator himself, man of many talents. And that's a great way to phrase, what Alireza's talent partially consists of. It's just, I mean, Karo Khan, it doesn't matter what the opening is. He will find a way, as Grandmaster Tisdall is saying, to unbalance the position, to create chances, and to make the game fun for everyone involved, particularly commentators who like unbalanced games.
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
any of those, though. Another idea, by the way, here is to go not knight d3, but bishop to d3. And one thing that caught my eye is if rook f2, first of all, you can fork on h3 immediately. You can also go bishop h4. I just saw a funny checkmate. Look at this checkmate, knight h3. That's just nasty little stuff. That's just nasty stuff. Now, you don't want to play in order to deliver such a checkmate. You want to play objectively. But that's just an example of how nasty this position can be. Alireza, though, needs to make a decision fast. He's got 7.5 minutes and counting.
He needs to make a decision very fast. Let's very quickly go to a game between two of our co-leaders, Hare Krishna and Fabiano Caruana. A lot has changed here. What is going on?
Well, definitely Fabi's still pressing the gas pedal down. He's definitely better. Now, what we need to notice here, and he's been nurturing his initiative for a while now. He did eventually put the knight on f4. I won't delve too deeply into some of the details here. Long story short, they traded knights. Fabi got a very strong passed pawn. He preserved his monster bishop, which of course exerts such strong pressure on the d4 pawn. Hare Krishna attempting to halt the progress of the pawn as Fabi, given that he has the bishop, is opening up the position, which would make sense. Hare Krishna redeploying his knight and putting it on e5, trying to make the most out of that knight. So this is the position currently on the board. Fabi contemplating his next move. Now, what should Fabi do here? Well, definitely he should try to harness the strength of this pawn on c4. But Hare Krishna has positioned his pieces in such a way as to make further, well, that has nothing to do with anything, as to make further progress of the pawn impossible. I wanted to highlight the c3 square, not the d3 square.
Is rook e4,
but maybe,
is rook e4 a threat right now?
Oh, actually it is. Rook e4 would potentially pick off that pawn. So definitely something Fabi has to factor in. I thought of maybe queen d4, keeping the queen centralized, but I agree. I mean, rook e4 here. But here I can give you a check, and then I can notice that the queen and the rook are on the same diagonal and play bishop f5. But even something like as simple as queen c3 could be quite a robust defensive construction here. So Fabi with a pretty big decision on his hands. I think bishop f5 is another move that came to mind. The pawn is untouchable due to the back rank, devastating back rank check on d1, forcing white to give up his queen. So lots of candidate moves here, even rook d4. Fabi, I think this decision is quite important. Another threat, by the way, that can be hidden is actually knight takes g6. If you look at this bishop,
I like it.
That pawn on f7 is overloaded. It's defending two things at once. So whatever Fabi does, he also has to defend against knight takes g6.
And we see Fabi taking his time. These guys, I know you guys out there can see the move numbers. They already on move 35. So Fabi, but still 6 moves to make. And I think we should go back, stick with the action. Let's go back to Yesipenko maybe again. I think the time is ticking down now.
And I think we have a Hare Krishna portrait before we do Pentala Hare Krishna. Amazing chess player. Let's quickly maybe listen in on some information about that incredible player.
I was pretty busy with various things, but related to chess, obviously. In January, you just look forward for Vaikanze. It's like no wonder they call Wimbledon of chess. I prepared for this event not just last week or something, but from some time ago. And of course, since I played couple of events earlier, I could also test the variations and so on. The first time I played way back in 2001, and I think some of the participants were not even born. So many strong players, world champions, and not only that, the competition gave chances to many youngsters. Like for example, this one has many youngsters to prove themselves and to compete against the best players. Well, I'm not really aiming for some kind of muscles or like a professional athlete. To play a long event like Vaikanze or many other events, you need to have your mind fresh, and that can be achieved by staying fit or to do some exercise. So for me, it is quite important.
Always a pleasure having Hare Krishna here in Vaikanze with us. He's such a gentleman, and what a fantastic chess player.
He really is a consummate professional. That's the word that comes to mind, professional. And I mean that in the best possible way. Such a hard worker. And as you said, he's just so nice, so humble. It's just a pleasure to have these kinds of people in the chess world. Speaking of pleasures in the chess world, Alireza Firouzja, the young star, he is a position that he has against Ariane Tari is exploding. Shall we check in on how his attack is going?
Let's go there. I see the rook sitting on d4. Dania, you called it.
Yes. Well, bishop g4 first. So first he decided to tighten up the pressure. Makes perfect sense on the knight. And once he's done that, here comes rook takes d4, this idea that we discussed. Once again, knight takes d4. Knight h3 is no longer possible because of rook takes h3, but queen g2 certainly still is. And that is not something Ariane is considering. How does Ariane defend here? Can you imagine Fiona having this with 9 minutes? And I would still be nervous for Alireza. I mean, 6 minutes is not easy too. Man, this is hard.
Yeah, and we see, but Harry, I feel like Alireza, he's so used. Like I'm actually surprised at how relaxed, how how relaxed Alireza looks. We can still see, like, I think you can tell that the legs are shaking under the
Oh, yeah.
table.
It's-
You know, he's in
I'm imitating. Yeah.
constant motion. And we have a move by Ariane. But I mean, Alireza in general is someone, even, you know, when I interview him, like, he's constantly moving. I don't think I've ever seen Alireza see him stand still or sit still for more than a couple of seconds.
He's in motion. And knight d6 check by Ariane Tari facing black with a very urgent decision. Does Alireza take or does he go king b8? Intuitively, I feel like this bishop on e7 could be a valuable attacking piece. It might not seem that way now, but one could imagine a reality where the bishop can potentially stick itself on h4 and maybe introduce further discombobulation within white's ranks. On the other hand, that knight on d6 is sort of a thorn in black's side. So a case could definitely also be made for bishop takes d6. My hunch is that both moves are probably okay. But here's what's great about Ariane's move. It faces black with a decision. And just by definition, Alireza will have to take off a chunk of his remaining time to make that decision. But he has made that decision relatively fast. He has indeed gone king to b8, trying to preserve the status quo. The ball tossed back into Ariane Tari's court. He once again has to find a move. Now, what exactly is the threat here? That's actually not that easy to determine. I'm not sure that black has anything immediate that he's threatening. I think Ariane does have one tempo that he can use to coordinate his defense. Maybe queen e3, just bringing another defender in. But then this, I mentioned the bishop g5 becomes very possible. That knight, once again, tied down to f3. Oh,
yeah, I mean,
I don't know what he
agree
should
with
do.
you. He probably has a temper right now, but he better use it wisely. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know how, because everything is queen g3, knight e2 check is a 4. Oh.
yeah, I mean, the position is so. I mean, I feel really genuinely sorry for Ariane Tari having to figure this out with 8 minutes on the clock. It feels like, I mean, as you just showed, queen g3, there's a fork on e2. It feels like I almost want to pass, you know? Like,
Yeah,
I
okay,
feel like
just,
with every
whatever.
move, I might blunder something, blunder a fork, hang a piece somewhere.
Indeed. And
he's
queen e3
gone
has
for
been
queen
played.
E3.
Okay, I think I have a good handle on how these players are thinking. But here's the thing: bishop g5. If bishop g5, I thought queen takes d4 might be a move, but actually it's not. You don't want to take the queen, but you do want to go knight e2 followed by knight takes d4, and you actually win the queen with the knight. So the eval bar doesn't like this move for whatever reason. I'm not exactly sure why. I'm trying to figure that out. This is just so complicated, and there's so much going on here. Maybe it's just a computer.
Can I take your rook? With the with the queen?
But then there's this knight e2, right? And then I take the queen on d4. No. I was checking that as well. But there is maybe just king h1. The point of this move is that you no longer can go to h3 with check. You're just trying to avoid the scariest part of the discovery. And that might be possible. So bishop g5 is one candidate move, but that's not the only move. White is not actually threatening anything, and that's the important part. Now black has a tempo, and now black has to figure out what to do with it.
What if I... Okay, what if I give you a check on h3?
Sensible, because you drive the king into the
And then
pin, but I'm
knight
not sure how to exploit
g5?
that pin now. Right,
Oh.
and then
Okay, the computer does not like...
maybe
and
here
now
I
it
can
is-
take on d4 already.
Yeah.
Bishop f3, rook f3. Now it's very important to keep this rook on c3 so that it pins the queen.
Yeah,
And this continues to be complex, but here the attack kind of fizzles out. Alireza under 5 minutes now, if the clock is accurate. What is the move? Man, this is hard to determine. You always have to consider captures here. So maybe it's time for bishop takes d6. Although, no, just d takes d6. I don't see how that benefits black at all. Yeah,
The
bishop
evil
g5
bar
is the only
just
move I
makes
see.
us commentators look like fools. Like, there is something. You guys have tried like 5 moves already.
Right.
You haven't figured it out yet. Keep trying.
No, I mean, it might be something as calm as queen to d5. That's still not the move. I mean, but okay, I hope people can understand that like this kind of position requires tremendous engagement and finding the move in like 3 seconds here.
Chatting is helping us out. Bishop takes h5, just simply taking the pawn.
Just takes. That's like a classic. I don't know. The eval bar. Maybe the eval bar is wrong. I mean, maybe it just drops. And bishop g5 has been played, so
You know him well.
We're all humans. I know him well. I've played thousands of games. I mean, no, just kidding. Alireza is a million times more skilled than yours truly in these kinds of positions, and he's kicked my butt plenty of times with these kind of scintillating attacks. So once again, to recap, the bishop is untouchable. What is the idea of bishop g5? The idea is to set up a discover check against white's king.
Sorry I interrupt you, but we've had a result in the game, Jan-Krzysztof Duda against Anish Giri, that ended peacefully as we see the players get off the board there.
And that's kind of what we expected. We had further trades. We had a rook endgame where black's activity of his rooks compensated for white's extra pawn. There's a full blockade going in. No need to continue this game, as we have a very professional high-level draw. But let's jump back. I think everybody's excited at how this game is unfolding. I know Anish drew unbelievable result. Here I'm expecting king h1 Fiona. I feel like if I can put myself in Ariane's shoes, he is going to see the threat of knight h3. And is he going to think, well, how do I avoid it? I think he might move his king. Of course, I can't predict the future, but that's my sense, my feeling here.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that white king is so incredibly weak wherever it goes.
Yes, it is.
When you're on h1, you're in the diagonal with my queen from c6 looking down at the king. If I go to g1, I feel like I'm stepping into all sorts of knight checks, which I also don't want to do. I mean, I would love for my king to be, on b2 or somewhere far from the danger zone, but that's rather a long run, and that's not gonna happen.
Yes, it is. No, wouldn't that be great? It's like, oh, this is paradise. Paradise awaits like 18 squares away. But what else is there to do other than queen? I mean, you could go at it from the other side. You could move the queen back to e1 as well. But this looks horrible. I mean, just if you're moving something, it's at least you might as well make the king safer. So I think king h1 is really the only move. I'm just not seeing anything other than that. But Ariane now with dipping himself to 5 minutes. This is going to be an amazing time scramble, Fiona. We are in for a treat. 13 moves to go, and they are playing a blitz game in one of the sharpest positions I've seen in this tournament.
And Ariane has just made a move. Rook takes c5.
Wow. Okay. I was going to point this move out. But I didn't think that it worked. But I guess I'm wrong. Oh my God. This is amazing. Oh, this is amazing. So queen takes c5. Look at this. Knight takes d4. I looked at this. Wait, no. This does lose. So what is his idea then? Maybe it's knight takes g5. It's to take the bishop. I actually didn't realize that it was hanging. It's to take the bishop on g5, and there's no discovery along this diagonal. And if Alireza makes a preliminary check on h3, then after the king moves away, bishop takes e3, rook takes c6, right? And this is everything saying I'm just like taking all the pieces. And at the end of the day, it's 2 pieces for a rook with a completely messy position. It's really anyone's game here. That actually might happen here. Let's see what Alireza does.
I wish I had about half an hour on my commentary clock to understand to understand this position. The players have between themselves less than 10 minutes to figure it out. And actually, Alireza is starting to look like 5 minutes ago, I was saying, he's looking calm and collected, but that's not the case any longer.
Well, I think he missed rook 65. That's a brilliant move to find in time for sure. And not only do you wish that you had 30 minutes on the commentary clock, I think both Tari and especially Firouzja are wishing that they had 30 minutes on the game clock. And Alireza is definitely disconcerted. I mean, I think he definitely, I think was winning at some point. But it's so easy to miss these kinds of moves when you feel like there's so many threats. And how could this possibly work? This is not fair. But when you've got a lot of pieces hanging, really anything can happen. It's almost like a quantum position. There's a lot of chance that goes along with these kinds of positions because 5 pieces are hanging and there's discovered checks all over the place. Now 2 minutes for Alireza. What is he going to do? How is this position going to fizzle out? Let's see.
Yeah, so we looked at queen takes c5, of course, the most obvious move. What other options could he be considering?
Well, I think this is the other option. It's knight h3 check versus queen takes c5. Off the top of my head, I'm not seeing any other moves. And after queen c5, knight g5, this position has to be evaluated by Firouzja because, I mean, literally, it is so wild that, I mean, you can't move the rook. The one thing that we can notice here is this pin against black's queen.
He has just taken the rook, by the way.
You know, maybe we can take a page out of the suggestion previously and just take on h5 here, basically punt the ball and toss it back into white's court. So he's taken, and knight takes g5 has happened. Okay, now the eval bar is showing a win for black. Is there some sort of brilliant idea here? Let's see. Apparently bishop e2 is the move. Bishop e2.
What is this? What is Daniel? What is going on?
Yeah, so rook e1. I'm just trying to figure out what the idea is, but that is the move. And I mean, maybe it's like queen b4. No, I guess not. Jeez. I'm just trying to like orient myself. Oh, rook d1. Oh my God! Sack the queen. Queen takes c5. Rook takes c1 check.
Such a
King
sick
f2, knight
finish.
c3. That is insane. And then the knight defends the rook. The king has to move. You take the queen. You're up a rook. That is the winning line. Look at this.
Insane line. Alireza only has 1 minute 10 on the clock to find it. He has just made a move.
Knight e2 check. He hasn't found it, but oh, that's a big mistake. And who can not understand it? I mean, how do you even find that? But this was apparently winning. An amazing idea. Just
we'll
too
have
little
to,
time.
once we make the time control, we'll have to show that again. That was just an incredible line.
Yeah, it really was. But rook d1. I mean, my job was an easy one because I was basically fed bishop e2. And finding rook d1 at that point is just a matter of eliminating all the moves.
By the way, I see a comment in the chat, Alireza tilting bad. I think Alireza is not tilting at all, by the way. Alireza would be tilting if, as you say, someone, tapped him on the shoulder and said, oh, by the way, bishop e2 instead of knight e2 was winning. But the players obviously have none of that knowledge, nor do they realize, okay, this is now plus white and for white. This position is so open with the time situation. I think all the players are they're not thinking of the outcome of the game. They're just trying to calculate as quickly as possible here.
Bishop e2 is, I'm just going to say it. I mean, even with 30 minutes, I would say it's almost impossible. I mean, this move is so illogical because you basically just put your bishop on this vulnerable square. And if you don't see rook d1, then you would never make such a move. And seeing rook d1 on demand in time pressure, I mean, I realize that watching from the side, one might think he's tilted or that has nothing to do with it. These players are fully focused. They are professionals. And the fact that Alireza misses an impossible win does not in any way diminish the quality of that effort that is being put in.
Absolutely. And you cannot tilt if you don't know that you missed the winning move.
Right,
he's not
exactly.
going to find out. Also, I don't think there's any chance, sometimes you get to the time control and you think back and you're like, oh, damn, I missed something there. But I don't think this is going to happen today. If we even make it to the time control, I don't think he's going to think back and think, oh, I missed bishop e2 there.
I have a feeling this game will end before the time control. Well, here, Ariane has a big choice. Even queen takes e2 was possible, but then I realized black has rook to d2 check. The funny thing is, if bishop takes e2, then white can give this check and then win back the queen and win the game. So Ariane has to calculate that as well. But the real decision is between these two moves. Does he play king h1 or does he play king to g2? The benefit of king to g2 is that the king is a little bit more open. If you think about that king sitting on h1, right? It's vulnerable in the future, way in the future, to a checkmate on f3. If you imagine that this knight disappears, if you have some sort of mass trade, this opens the king up to more tactics, whereas king g2 at least promises the king an additional escape square on f2. From that perspective alone, king g2 would make more sense. But that's, of course, not a legitimate reason in such a sharp position.
On the other hand, if you're staying on the g file, maybe you're worried that you're opening yourself up to checks along the g file or to the knight at 4 checks. So it's not exactly like, unfortunately for Ariane Tari, it's not exactly like he has a safe haven for his king.
No, it's you're choosing between the frying pan, the fire and the hurricane, the tornado. I mean, where do you go? Which evil do you accept?
Well, he chose the g2 fire, and there we see a close-up of Alireza's clock. So even a few less seconds on the clock than we see on the screen, just 1 minute 24, Alireza Firouzja.
Indeed. And now, yeah, he's got to find something here. Things have definitely spiraled out of control. It's anybody's game. It's so unclear. A move that comes to mind is a check on d5. You can try to stabilize the situation. And in the event of king f2, that would, I think, be a very big blunder due to this check on f4. So in this position, Ariane would have to cover with a knight, and probably with this knight, in order to leave the d6 knight, which would potentially set up checkmating ideas along these lines. I was calculating here, queen takes e5. Probably this loses due to that check on f8.
Let's
So
see if we
this
can
might
get
happen.
the camera back on Alireza's face as the seconds tick down. Under 40 seconds now for Alireza as he tries his best to figure out his way out of this maze, but still 11 moves to make.
Yeah, that is
oh, there was a
insane.
draw offer. There was a draw offer accompanied King G2, and Alireza has accepted.
Accepts it. Okay. And that's interesting. I mean, we can understand that from Tari's perspective, who had been, crushed, or seemed to be crushed at the start of the attack. And a draw offer is actually, and I realize that people will be very surprised, but this is a legitimate technique that is advanced in some books, where you offer the draw, and Alireza, I think, did a very good thing to accept that draw. What Ariane was also kind of trying to do, if Alireza had declined the draw and made a further mistake, that would have merely contributed to the regret that he would be feeling at the game. Because Alireza can definitely sense that he missed something. He doesn't know where it was, but he can definitely sense it. And we can totally understand Ariane's perspective here. I mean, surviving this insane attack by Alireza and half a point is definitely something that he will cherish as a result. And a good job by Alireza to keep his calm.
Absolutely. I think for us as commentators and for the viewers, of course, it's an anticlimactic and to a spectacular game. I saw questions, why would Alireza accept? Well, first of all, we saw his clock. It's a very well-timed draw by Ariane Tari. When you have 30 seconds on the clock, I don't think either of the players knew what the evaluation was of the position, simply because it was such a crazy position where both of them realized, okay, neither of us are winning or losing right now, but we will be losing if we make one single mistake. And so I think from that point of view, none of the players can really be faulted.
Yeah, before we review the results that are in, let's very quickly run through the winning line again. So in this position, right before the end, bishop to e2 was the key move. Now this attacks the rook. If the rook takes the knight, then the d file. So this is also a very nice line. King f2. Now what you need to do here is dislodge the king from the queen. You give a check on f1, and then you give a check on e1. The king has to take the rook, and then not only does the queen pick up the queen, but it also picks up the rook. So black wins in this line. But that's not even the end of it. Rook to e1 is therefore the only possible retreat square. Now rook d1 follows, sacrificing the queen. White has to accept it, otherwise he just loses the rook. And after rook takes e1 check, the king has only one square. And now that is accompanied with knight to d3 check, hitting the king, forking the queen, and also defending the rook. The king must move away from the rook. Black takes the queen, and black is winning here. He is simply up a rook. But who can blame Firouzja for not seeing this with about a minute on his clock? Nonetheless, an incredible winning line. And the game concludes in a draw. So wow.
I think if he had found this, we could have given him, I don't even know if there is a brilliancy prize here or not, but if there were, I think we could have given it to him right here and then after just 4 rounds. Shall we go back to Niels Grandelius and Andrei Yasipenko, which was the other game, which seemed to be headed straight for a big time scramble?
Absolutely, and maybe, definitely. So we've had 3 draws, by the way, today. Van Forest, Carlsen, Duda, Giri, just to recap, and Tari, Firouzja have all ended in draws, and they've all been very, very combative. But some of the most interesting results are yet to come. So what's going on here? Looks like Andre is holding things together, Fiona.
Yeah, so far so good. My eyes immediately went to the clock. So both players, 2 minutes. They on move 34, which means 7 moves to play still for Niels and 6 moves to play for Yasipenko. Let's maybe just click through the last few moves that we missed.
Sure. And basically what happened was after knight f5, knight e4, I think we were seeing this. Niels decides to take that bishop. and ruin White's pawn structure. Andre deciding to keep the knight on f5. That's basically his only active piece, but he manages to kind of get his pieces going again, get the bishop active, that rook kind of tied down to e5, much like in Firouzja Tari. So Niels saying get out of there now. He goes rook d to d5. He's trying to put the pressure and put that heat on the knight. You mentioned checkmating ideas, Fiona. If the knight ever moves away, boom, rook h5, and this is a very pretty mate. So he's trying to tie the knight down to f5. Andre offering up a rook trade, and now Niels getting his queen to an active square. This is crazy. I mean, this is so hard to defend. And the point is, if bishop h3, I think that Niels has a very, very devilish idea cooked up. He can take on d1, or maybe even queen h5 immediately. And the point is that queen takes h3 is going to be a very, very big threat in these positions. I think I'm not finding the most accurate execution of this, but something to that effect is going to be super nasty. So Andre going rook to d4, using his rook to protect the bishop. I think that's a very accurate move here. Wow.
And we just came from one messy position. No rest for the wicked. Dania, how do you even start to evaluate what's going on here?
Well, this is not quite as complicated as Tari Firouzja, but it's definitely up there. I think the key question is, well, one of Black's major strengths lies in this X-ray that the bishop is exerting on White's king. White's key defensive idea is that he's positioned his minor pieces in such a way as to make progress on the king side very difficult. So the tempting move is definitely h5. I think it's tempting to chase the bishop away, but now it parks itself on h3, and the bishop is pretty safe here. So I'm actually not sure how exactly Niels can increase the pressure. I mean, he might at some point want to take the rook, but then the queen replaces the rook, and still the rook on e5 is pinned. So, and he's got to make a move as well. 2 minutes.
I was just saying under 1 minute, and as I said it, the clock jumped back up.
It did. I was going to say the same
Niels.
thing. Right. I didn't know he gains time in his clock when he asked, I just want a minute here. Just give me a minute.
Niels just played f6, by the way, if I'm seeing that correctly.
Okay, that's interesting. So he's trying to cement. Okay, so what I think he's trying to do is, in the event that a queen appears on d4, it will not be x-raying that rook. It looks like a weakening move, but the reality is it's actually strengthening the king's defenses, because the king can always escape to h7. So I think he's building up this little pawn chain to prevent White from trying to checkmate him at some point on g7. Also, this is kind of like a waiting move. Esipenko has to find another improving move, which in time pressure is extremely difficult.
Esipenko has just drawn his bishop back to h3. I think maybe just one quick word. I think this is a spot where I think Niels' experience could play a big role. Niels has been competing at the highest level. He talked in the video about playing here in Vachier 11 years ago. I mean, 11 years ago, Andrei Esipenko was only 7 and just making his first steps on the chessboard.
Indeed, and Niels is also a great blitz player, and that should not be underestimated. I've lost him several times. He's very fast. He's obviously an amazing tactician. And by the way, queen h5 here is very tempting. I mentioned this previously, trying to perhaps set up some sort of a queen sacrifice. But I guess we're about to see his move. He goes bishop to d7. Instead, he goes after this knight on f5. Again, very sensible. I think that's a great move. And he ties down all of White's pieces. Now they all have to defend this knight on f5. Esipenko has to find yet another accurate defensive move. Niels doing everything that he can. And you can just see, I agree with you, Fiona, his experience coming to light here as he finds one excellent move after another, maintaining full pressure on White's position.
Yeah, what do you do? Interestingly, actually, there on the camera, do you see Niels just giving a little shake of the head, then a little stare? I love watching the players when they're so short on time.
It's all the emotions come bubbling up. You just can't hide any of it when you've got a minute. That's not the priority. The priority is to refocus and focus every fiber of your brain and your being to find the correct move. And the emotions just come pouring out when you've got a minute and you're either disappointed or you're happy. You'll see all sorts of things happen. As Esipenko hesitating, and now he's about to make a move.
Yeah, even Esipenko, we can't see his face, but we saw the head shake even from the behind camera. It's tough.
Right.
It's a tough spot. Okay, how do you deal with that knight
Well, I think he might end up taking the rook and which slightly diminishes the pressure on the
I
knight,
just
but
thought
it
it can
doesn't
really go both
fully.
ways. We both had. He
Daniel,
had 1
sorry to
minute and I
cut you
had
off.
2
We have an
minutes.
interview
worries.
with Ariane Tari.
I was
Let's
not
go
sure
there.
what was going on. I saw the engine now saying zeros, but I wasn't sure. I thought he will.
Zeros, but even then.
Yeah, even then. I mean, when you have when you're so low on time, anything can happen really. So 3 results were possible, but I thought he.
So there was something like a little bit of fear involved in the decision.
The main reason was because I thought I was just lost like 3 moves before, so I was just so happy to get a half a point. You know, I was sure I'm going to lose at some point.
Well, according to the engines, you probably were losing, but you were also winning at some point.
Yeah, this was just an insane game. It was so crazy. It was just like mental torture from the start. You have to think about so much, and it's just so much to calculate all the time. So it's definitely my most difficult game here so far.
Was it your strategy to get like a tactical game, or you just couldn't manage to keep it strategical?
The thing is, it's actually the most stupid thing you can do against Firouzja to get a like.
I wasn't going to say that, but yeah.
Yeah, like you get a tactical crazy position against Firouzja. That's what he eats for breakfast, you know. So it's just maybe he can. Maybe he's as good as Magnus in those positions.
But there was no way to avoid it for you.
I could have avoided it. It was very stupid. I played g4. I went for a crazy game. I should just take on c5. I knew I was better there, but the problem was I couldn't and just couldn't fight my demons. I just played g4, and then of course this is position for Firouzja, and he played well. I thought I was doing well. I mean, g4. I thought it should work for me, but I have to check it. It was crazy.
Okay, but now after everything is finished, it's a pretty okay feeling, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, before the game, draw with white, it's the result, yeah. But just like 20 minutes ago, I thought I was going to lose, so I'm a bit happy to get a half a point.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
Danny, I think we can address what Ariane said in the interview, but let's first follow the end of this time scramble between Andrei Yasipenko and Niels Grandelius.
Niels continuing to put the pressure on. Now he infiltrates the second rank with his rook. The most immediate response here would be rook f2, but something tells me that probably black has something to the effect of knight e5, trying to dislodge the queen, or maybe even bishop c6 here. In response to rook f2. Andre, again, 1 minute, and he's got to find something very, very difficult here. He is definitely worse, and 2 critical moves to be made. These are the 2 longest moves, perhaps, of his career that he's got to make in 1 minute.
Yeah, and we see him hovering over the queen. Queen a8 is on the board.
Indeed. Queen a8 check. Makes sense. King h7 is going to follow, and I wonder how he will follow that up. Maybe he wants to just snap that pawn off on a6, and maybe he just wants to say, all right, YOLO. Mate me. And which is no easy task, because Niels will have to make his 40th move as well. Let's check out what Yasipenko will cook up here.
So the last move now before they get an additional 50 minutes. Is it going to be the YOLO Queen a6 or what else?
I mean, that looks so dangerous, though, to abandon the king like that. But on the other hand, I mean, it can pose Niels with a very difficult challenge in his 40th move, which he will also have only a minute for. So, man, okay, Queen e4. Queen e4, getting the queen back to the center. Now, obviously, he is allowing Niels to take on b2, and maybe his idea is to go knight e7. Maybe he wants to create kind of a pin. That doesn't look particularly effective. I think Niels can just grab the pawn, to be honest, and call a bluff on Andre's move. So I'm just not sure what it is exactly Andre is planning, but I guess we're about to find out. 50 moves added. That is still, of course, a relief. And Niels with 1 move to play until the time control. Let's see what it is.
He was hovering over the king area, so at least at first sight doesn't look like he's gonna snatch that pawn. And he has just gone back king h8.
Okay. I'm not sure exactly what he didn't like about this. I mean, I'm really wondering what it is. I mean, rook b2, and I don't see anything right off the bat, but maybe there was something he didn't like. Maybe it was knight takes g7, maybe something crazy. But in any case, they have made the time control with Niels preserving for sure his advantage. We will monitor how Andre defends this and the other games. But first, I think we are going to take a quick break, aren't we?
Absolutely, we'll be right back. And we are back here from Vachier-lagrave with all the action from round 4. What a day it has been so far, Dania.
Indeed, it's been a day of incredible action, and the results belie the nature of that action, as we've had another result. Pentala Harikrishna and Fabiano Caruana drawing their game. It seemed that Fabiano, and of course the game of the day so far has been Firouzja's game, which also ended in a draw, but it seemed that Fabi had pressure going, but he did in fact allow this knight takes g6 move. And what ended up happening is that he played queen d1, he saw this, and he was able to distract White's rook from its attack of the bishop. However, what he may not have taken into account is that Harikrishna gets actually 3 pawns for the piece, or maybe Caruana saw this and just didn't see anything better, and they repeat moves. 3 pawns for the piece is perfect compensation. So Caruana saw no reason to continue, and rightly so. That game also ending in a draw, and Alexander Donchenko's game is also, I think, going to finish in a draw very, very shortly. So we see a lot of these games ending in draws, but not for lack of trying by any of the players.
Oh, and maybe let's catch up quickly on the 3 games that we still have ongoing, and then we can come back briefly on some of the things Ariane Tari mentioned in his interview and some of the madness that happened in that game.
Indeed, and it's been a while since we've checked into the end game that MVL has against Antonio Guijarro. So let's take a look at that one. We saw the transition into the end game, and they start taking each other's pawns. Rook c6 is a very tricky move, by the way, threatening rook takes f5 and creating the pin against the g-pawn. So Anton had to move his king. And MVL coming up with an extra pawn here at the end of the day. But Anton has very active pieces. He's got the active rook. He's got a bishop that can, at the right moment, fianchetto on b7 and really start an attack against the king. I think MVL is planning to meet that move with d5, intercepting the bishop. So Anton has to be a little bit careful here. But I don't think that black should be worse. I think if Anton makes a couple of accurate moves here, he should be able to make the draw, and he's got plenty of time.
Yeah.
Now that the time control's been made.
I might have jinxed it today. I came into the day saying it's the day before the rest day. The players are all gonna be fighting. I mean, they are. Don't get me wrong. Not fighting. They're all gonna be out for blood. They can rest tomorrow, but might have jinxed it, and it could be our first entirely peaceful day here in Vik.
Absolutely, and we probably will see this game in a draw. We'll see Donchenko, Wojciech almost certainly in a draw, and that basically leaves Esipenko Grandelius, and it seems also like Esipenko, having made the time control, is making some progress towards stabilizing that situation. So indeed, we might see a day of peace. Just to address a point that I think some people are making about the Tari game, I would really push back on criticizing Ariane too much for that draw or Alireza for accepting it. And one must realize that it is important to keep the fans' interest at heart. We certainly are the first to say that we like bloodbaths and we like the games to continue. But we must also realize that these players have to put their interests first. And if if Ariane feels uncomfortable playing, and he feels that a half a point is a good result, then that is a sensible thing to do from his perspective. And that also has to be understood. So I would caution against being too critical of those sorts of things. These players are all here to fight, and there's no question about it in my mind.
I couldn't agree more. And I mean, even the word choice by Ariane Tari in his interview, if I recall correctly, he literally called it mental torture, Like, I think we cannot overstate just how demanding such a game is. And these guys were navigating these complex positions from such an early point in the game. And I mean, I can agree more with you that absolutely none of the players can be criticized. Of course, we would all have loved to see how the game played out, but I think absolutely a fair result.
Yeah, definitely. And as we see Anton going rook c1, harassing MVL's bishop, the question is, where do you put that? I mean, bishop b3 seems like a pretty sensible move, and perhaps Anton wants that rook to have access. I don't know exactly to what. I mean, c7 doesn't seem like a particularly juicy square, but maybe he wants some clarity in the position. Rook e8, rook e1 is another active idea here. It's hard to get a grasp entirely on this position. As I said, MVL is up a pawn, but his pawns are all over the place, and with only 3 pawns left, it just doesn't seem like that material advantage should be enough to win him the game, really, or to generate significant chances. We will keep checking in on this game.
Yeah, shall we quickly see Alexander Donchenko and Radoslav Wojtaszek, which has once again a lot more pieces have come off the board since we last left it off.
Right, and Alexander, after a very long think, in this bishop endgame, goes king c2, and I think this is a dead draw. Now, of course, despite white's extra pawn, black has very active pieces, and he's got a complete blockade over the c-pawn. That c-pawn is not going anywhere. And I think what Alexander might have been contemplating is where to put the king. White actually has to be a little bit careful. If he had played king a4, I think that would have been asking for trouble. If black's king can get to c4, then black actually generates very significant winning chances, because all of these pawns are on squares that are not very desirable for white's bishop. And as soon as white's bishop leaves g2, then black's bishop can infiltrate to f1. So Alexander, actually, if anybody has to be careful, it's probably Alexander. And now we might see a repetition along the lines of bishop b5, king b3, bishop c4. This game will end in a draw really any second.
Yeah. Which will leave us with only 2 games. The game we just came from, Maxime vachier-lagrave against David Anton. And let's go back there, Andrei Esipenko against Niels Grandelius, who we were just watching make the first time control before our break.
Indeed, and knight h4 was Andrei Esipenko's move, executed fairly quickly as he tries
Daniel,
to...
sorry to interrupt you. We're going to go to an interview with Fabiano. Caruana will come back to this game right after.
And you escaped me. But that was a game to discuss. I mean, who am I? But according to me, it was one of the best game I've seen in a long time. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it was close to being one of my best games I've ever played. But yeah, not quite. I mean, you also have to finish the game off. But yeah, I was actually a bit surprised, because when he played bishop f6, I thought this move was losing because of what happened in the game. And I was kind of shocked he didn't play knight takes c3, which looked like much more messy. I mean, and at least there it gave me like many options, while here he was kind of forcing. So I thought he would play knight c3. He played bishop f6, which I thought is kind of crazy, because it goes by force into the position we had. Where after...
But still, you spent like 15 or 20 minutes in that position. Why was that?
Well, I still had to make sure. I mean, it's still very complicated, and I didn't want to rush with my moves, and also I was like not entirely sure to take on h7 or to play rook d5 first. It wasn't a completely obvious choice, but I rejected it because if he plays g6, my attack sort of finishes. And when we got to the position after king h8, I kind of knew that bishop d4 was an option, because I'd spent quite a bit of time looking at the position before we got there. And I was hoping there would be more. Like I was looking at queen h3, queen h7. It's the forcing checks where I take on g6. He takes on b2, and I play king b1. And here he has to make a quiet defensive move, rook e7, because I have a threat mate of queen f7, threat of queen f7 mate. And then I thought there should be something winning there, but I couldn't see it. So I eventually settled on bishop d4, which was not really what I wanted, because the game kind of continues and continues and continues. And maybe I should have just gone for it, but I really wasn't sure. But I was very happy with this queen f7, all this stuff, it looked winning. And after queen a2, I felt like it was winning. I had about 3 minutes left. My first instinct was rook g3. It threatens rook a3, trapping the queen. It also threatens like rook h3, queen g6. If he takes the pawn, it's winning. And then I spent like more or less 2.5 of my 3 minutes, because after queen a1, king d2, king h7, I couldn't like finish him off. I was very surprised. Rook h3, knight h5, he has like this construction. It's probably still winning, but it was like somehow I was
But not like forcing.
Well, it's all very forcing for him. Yeah. So it feels like I should be able to calculate this to a win, but maybe I started in the wrong place with rook g3, and if I had started with like rook takes g6, then I would have probably just played this and gone to a pretty trivial winning ending, where he takes the pawn b2, I play rook g3, and he has to trade queens on e4, and it wasn't clear to me that this was winning over the board, but I didn't have enough time to really verify it. But after rook a3, it's actually very, very trivial. And in the game, I just made one stupid move. I think the main reason I can blame myself for not winning this is that I played rook e1. If I had played a4, which was like, basically I was going to play a4, and then I thought I'll play rook e1 and paralyze him for a move, and this was just a terrible blunder. After that, it becomes very difficult to win. But a4, I think I would have cleaned up the game pretty easily if I'd played that. So yeah, it was like just one regret during that game.
Yeah, and the ending is also probably difficult because you realize you sort of spoiled it already a little bit.
Yeah, okay, of course, rook e1 it was a disappointment also in terms of still fighting for a win after. It becomes quite difficult. I mean, I was told that if I had played like king c3 and king b2 at some point, it was winning, but I don't think I can even think in this direction to put my king on b2. And I'm not even sure if it was 100% winning. I mean, some strong engines are saying white might win, but I can't really blame myself for things which don't even come to my mind. So the main regret I have is that I didn't play a4.
Okay, thank you. Great game, not a good result for you.
Thanks.
Okay.
So Fabi there today mostly talking about the spectacular game he played yesterday against Jan-Krzysztof Duda, and well, as he said, his main regret is not going for not having gone for that a4 move in the ending.
Indeed, and you know, as he mentioned, it's painful because it's really would have been, as he said, one of the games that he ever played, and it still is. I think that the fact that the game ended in a draw doesn't take away entirely from some of the amazing things that he did in that game, but nonetheless, speaking very frankly, was Fabi about some of his experiences in that game. And speaking of draws, we have another one for you. As
sad news.
Niels was pressing, but in the end, this move knight h4, something Niels didn't like about the position. Maybe he still had a slight advantage, but deciding instead to repeat moves here. The computer does show an advantage for him. I would suppose instead of king h8, maybe the move king g8 and king f7 would extend the game, but one can understand that like this king on f7 does seem quite weak. The pawn on a6 is hanging, and I just think the players are absolutely exhausted, and you know we can just see it. You know they don't want to lose, as you said, Fiona, before the rest day, and you know, as the games start winding down, the players might have an early end, and I don't think anybody really minds. They have a couple more hours to
we'll
rest.
have plenty more rounds, till 9 more rounds after this one. That does mean we only have 2 games remaining.
Indeed.
Both of them looks like they should be headed towards draw. Maybe MVL now with the best chances of still getting a little something out of today's round.
Yeah, especially because the time situation, not Anton's friend, is David taking a lot of time, burning through his clock here, trying to find the most accurate way to develop the maximum compensation for the pawn. Without a doubt, the position remains drawn, but there's a lot of possibilities that he has to work through. I mean, rook d8 is one option. That seems very sensible. He can give a check on b7. That's another option. But this might lead to a slightly inferior rook endgame after bishop f3. I think that was MVL's idea with his last move, bishop e2. I think rook d8 seems to be more flexible from that point of view. But yeah, I mean, black is very compact here. He's got everything protected, and white, as I mentioned earlier, has pawns scattered all over the board. So definitely anticipating a draw here, but David will have to be a little bit accurate here without a doubt.
We'll come back to it. Actually, well, just before we went to the interview, let's go back there. You were explaining the intricacies of that bishop ending in Donchenko against Wojciech to us.
Well, I think there isn't too much to explain here. I think the only thing, if anybody has winning chances here, I thought it might actually be black. And black can try to come around with his king and force Zugzwang. And the thing about Zugzwang here is if white has to move his bishop, then there is this move bishop to d1. And, you know, the bishop comes around and collects that pawn on h3. Now, we see from the eval bar that even this position is drawn somehow. I'm not exactly sure how, and I think maybe it has to do with the move bishop d1 check. I don't know. But it seems to me that this is not a very desirable situation for Alexander, but I don't see how he avoids it because white's king, he's going to have to move his bishop eventually, because the thing is, white's king is going to get what's called shouldered, right? White is in Zugzwang, and every time he moves his king, black inches closer to the pawn. So I think Alexander, he's taken a lot of time here. I think he's calculated some sort of a draw after this move, bishop f3. So I'm not losing faith in his ability to make the draw here, but this does look kind of scary. And I think Radoslav has absolutely nothing to lose. He has to try the move king a4, and he has just played it.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an instructive endgame, this one, that the side with the pawn up is actually the one who's fighting for his life.
Yeah, and this actually might be, I'm actually starting to get quite concerned because I'm not really seeing exactly what the draw is in this position. In addition, black doesn't even have to hurry. Black can go king b3 first and stick the king on b2. And, you know, only when the king is maximally close to the pawn, now you can go bishop f1. And let me tell you, and okay, maybe king e1. And if you take on h3, this is a funny situation. White wins because the bishop is boxed in. But here's what can be done here. You can try to go. No, you can't try to go. I don't know what I was going to say. I mean, maybe bishop d3 and like bishop c4. But you see, the problem is I just don't see the Zugzwang here. So maybe this is somehow winning through some miraculous sequence of bishop moves. But I'm not quite seeing. I do think that this is going to happen as Alexander does indeed play the move, bishop f3. Incredible Fiona effort by Radoslav to really manufacture winning chances. That's kind of unthinkable when you thought about what position occurred on the board. Alexander's definitely kicking himself here.
Yeah, he really is. And I was just thinking, for his sake, I really hope he can hold on, because we already talked about losing before a rest day is painful, full stop. But I mean, I said a few hours ago, I remember saying, yeah, Alexander is playing for 2 results here. Everything is under control. And it seemed like things were under control, but somehow Radek has I think it's very impressive how he's managed to somehow create chances here.
Yeah, it really is. It's and bishop endgames are among the trickiest in chess because they create always this deceptive image that it's a dead draw, you know, it's a fortress. But Zugzwang always plays a role because you don't have a lot of pieces left. And there's a lot of bishop endgames that are kind of exactly like this. That one side is up a pawn or it's equal material and you just can assume that it's a draw. And then all of a sudden you realize that one side is in Zugzwang and has to allow the other side to keep making progress. So the other thing that really hurts White is pawn endgames are unthinkable because the king just collects all of White's pawns. The king activity here is totally devastating. King e3, king c4, and then king d4. So this concept of shouldering is very important.
And yeah, maybe we can announce who our second guest of the day is going to be, because it will be very interesting to hear what he makes of this position.
Absolutely, and no better person to have in order to assess this endgame than the legend grandmaster Boris Gelfand, who again really needs no introduction. Super grandmaster, a world champion contender, participant in countless super tournaments throughout the years, achieved the high rating of, I think, 2780 plus. Boris is a professional, an amazing player, an author, and just a legend who is still maintaining his very, very high level, even as he gets older.
Sorry, we have an interview with Niels Grandelius, so let's go there before we get Boris on.
Yeah. Niels, do I have to be angry to you today?
Yeah, I guess you have to.
Sort of out of nothing, I checked your position after 20 moves, and the engine said that you were much better.
Yeah, that was my impression as well. At some point, I think he should try to just liquidate and trade as much as possible, but he kept the position fluid for 1 or 2 moves too much, and suddenly I have just taken over completely after I get this d5 in, and I'm so active, and his king is very vulnerable. But it took me too much time to find this out, and then in the time trouble I played very, very poorly.
And your chances vaporized?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it looked very promising with the attack, but even move 40, what we got, I could probably just have picked up a pawn or 2 instead of what I was trying to repeat the position once, and then on move 41 consider whether I should pick up the pawns or make the draw, but he didn't. Move 41 he played on, or he played another move and secured the draw, so that was very, very stupid. Had I had a couple of more minutes, I would just have picked up some pawns and Don't know if I will win, but very good chance at least.
And it must have been an intense game today because you entered the press room without realizing you're still the leader.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, after missing so many chances, it feels a bit strange. But on the other hand, I also made some good moves again today, so I'm overall not too dissatisfied. It's just nice to be playing some chess.
Okay, and 2.5 out of 4. Before the tournament, you probably would have signed immediately for that score.
Definitely, but okay, it's still 9 games. It's basically a full tournament left, so anything can happen, of course.
Okay, good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Niels there kicking himself after the draw today. Dania, we're going to take a quick break and we will bring on the legend.
Absolutely, I can't wait.
Boris Gelfand. Don't go anywhere, guys. You're in for a treat with this one.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Tata Steel. And as promised, we are joined by a legendary guest. It is an honor to have in the studio Grandmaster, Super Grandmaster Boris Gelfand, world champion contender, and for many, many decades, one of the top players in the world. Boris, a big honor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor for me to be a guest in such a good company and in such a legendary tournament. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, speaking of the legendary tournament, I certainly want to get your input on the ongoing games. But first, maybe a couple of questions about your extensive experience. You, of course, have played in Vaikanze many, many times. Any highlights or stories or experiences that come to mind in Vaik?
Well, it's quite a few. Unfortunately, I didn't do that well normally in Vike. I won in my first appearance, 92. I tied with Salov with the equal tiebreak. Then I won candidates match against Adams in 94. But then, okay, my tournaments were from horrible to decent, my performances. But the atmosphere there, it's always fantastic. It's, as I understand, unfortunately, this year, it's wonderful the tournament takes place, but still, it's a pity this legendary atmosphere with, hundreds of spectators watching and after the round you go to eat somewhere and players who play other section sit next to you, you discuss games, all this great experience. Hopefully we'll be back next year for everyone.
Yeah, we're all definitely hopeful for that. Well, speaking of these unusual circumstances, have you been participating in any of the online events? What is your take on how chess has adapted in the COVID age?
Yeah, okay. Chess, it's hard to say, but I think my feeling that chess adapted the best way possible. Of course, all this offline event are very rare, and some of them where I had to take place were cancelled at the last moment, and probably to a good reason. Yeah, probably it was a wise decision by organizers. But I played few online events. Unfortunately, there are not that many of high level. I played some Blitz event. I played this great Legend event, some Rapid Blitz, but play some training games with friends. But okay, it's good to see tournaments and given the choice, I think chess had adapted pretty decently.
That's an interesting take. And in addition to participating actively in tournaments, to this day, you've also written recently a series of very highly regarded books on decision making in chess. I have read two of them and greatly enjoyed them: Positional, Dynamic, and now Technical Decision Making in Chess. Could you tell us a little bit, Boris, about your experience writing these books? What did you try to largely target in these books, and maybe any other experiences of writing these very well received recent books?
Thank you. Actually, the two books you mentioned about positional decision making and dynamic decision making were out years ago. And for all these years, we worked with my co-author Jakob Ogort on the next book. And we produced so much material that we had no choice but to split them in two volumes: Technical Decision and Major Piece Endgame. And basically, there are two layers I want to underline with these books. One of them is some really incredible beauty of chess, which uncovered by deep analysis, but also maybe even more important, the method to think in this kind of position, because what it was my idea, and my co-author shared it, I think, with me, the incentive that nowadays with all the engines, many chess fans, chess players got lost because they see that, let's say, two or three moves show the same assessment. And it's very difficult to tell between them. And we try to describe it from human point of view. Which move is better? Which move is less good? Which move allows you to achieve better result? How to think, rather than, because engines brought a lot to our life, but also they started, to take a role and, mislead many times people who want to analyze chess and to learn from chess, learn chess.
That's really fascinating. So do you feel that some young players maybe are misguided in their approach? They're over relying on the engine, and that's stifling some development of certain players?
Yeah, I do believe so. Actually, during this lockdown, I made quite a few online lectures, camps with a lot of really, basically, vast majority of the best talents in the world went through them. And I noticed that, and I try to share my knowledge and discoveries not only from material from the books, but also from other experiences and games, how to use engine to the best of them, and how to try to learn to think in the most productive way.
That makes
Of
that
course,
makes a lot.
each of us are learning each day. Yeah, there is no limit. I learn myself each day. You know, let's say you analyze some games, and the engine suggests the first layer, but when you dig, you realize that sometimes, and quite often, the first impression maybe it's not the most practical or the most decent decision.
I mean, that's really interesting. I think that's a book that many people should get across all levels. And speaking of, well, technical endgames and interesting positions, maybe we could get your take on the two remaining endgames and your general impressions of this edition of Tata Steel. And maybe we could switch to the Donchenko or Wojciech endgame first. That seems to be the most interesting one. Do you feel that Black has any chances here?
Let me see. Let me see. Let me see. I opened it on my board.
Yeah, so it looks like Bishop C2 last
Possible,
move
but
played.
probably it's a calculation. If Black, I don't think there are two ways for Black to progress, in my opinion. One is, try to Zugzwang, but maybe it's not realistic. Another to grab H3 pawn. And we have to calculate if you can be in time. Or C pawn would be like Bishop F1. If Bishop F1 doesn't win, now I don't think any other idea exists. So Bishop F1, what we do probably Bishop D3.
D3.
Bishop H3, C4.
Right.
Yeah. C4, Bishop G4, and Bishop G2. There are two moves, yeah?
Right. So if Bishop G4, C5, just
H3, and Bishop F1, yeah, or what?
Bishop F1, maybe Bishop F3.
Bishop F3, we take on H3.
Yep, take on
He
E4.
takes on E4, and now.
Yeah, this seems like Black has some chances here. Can
Yeah,
White?
but maybe we have to go deeper. But I have a feeling that it must be some semi-forced line, maybe where we stop. Maybe Bishop G4, G3, Bishop F3. Try to speculate by transformation to pawn endgame.
Right,
But
maybe
of course,
Bishop
it's
E2.
already, the margin it's very narrow. Bishop E2 is better, you think, yeah?
On move after Bishop takes G4. I mean, it seems to force Bishop H3.
Yeah, then it's then okay, then C5 and
Bishop G2.
G2. Maybe we can go Bishop D3, and both of the sides will queen, but no checks, and probably Black are. It's rather Black or in trouble because we can mate them, you know.
It's just mating, yeah. Queen C3 and so many threats. Yeah. Wow, that's very cool.
Yeah, it's an incredible line we discovered, yeah.
Yeah, Queen C1 is not possible, and White's King is usually the side who promotes first is almost always has the initiative, but here it's reversed.
Yeah.
So that doesn't seem possible, and maybe Bishop G2 we can check.
Let's check Bishop G2, but probably it's the
same thing.
We play C5. It's the same story, yeah.
Yeah, just with the G4 pawn, but that doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
Wow. So maybe Black loses in this line.
Yeah, so probably Black has nothing better to do. Radek has nothing better to do than just to repeat and accept a draw, yeah?
But if Radek goes Bishop, let's say Bishop B5, yeah, White can go Bishop D3. The pawn endgame with the C pawn is just a draw.
Yeah,
or actually, it's not worth it.
White can never lose it, yeah?
Right. So he has to go back. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That was close, though. I mean, it looked like a dead draw at first, but he created some chances.
Yeah. But okay, I think also I missed quite. I was following the games and I missed a bit, but it seems that Now it's no chance, yeah?
Yeah, looks like Radek is thinking, but it appears to be a draw. And maybe we can check out the other game quickly before I ask for your general impressions and let you go. So MVL against Anton. Looks like he's won a second pawn, but now he's pinned. What are your thoughts on this position?
My general feelings that it shall not be enough for a win for white. Of course, white has 2 pawns, but I think the pieces lack any harmony. For example, how will they save a bishop? Okay, they can play rook e5, give up 1 pawn back, but okay, it's not or maybe we blunder something. Engine says us, yeah.
Maybe takes rook a4.
Rook a4. Maybe bishop d7 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that forces the rook onto a dark square.
Yeah.
Or bishop d3. There's bishop d3, bishop b5, bishop takes b5.
D3, bishop d5 was my idea.
But bishop takes b5.
Bishop b5. Oh my god.
That's crazy. Bishop c6.
My god.
Wow. I mean, there's so many crazy resources in these endgames. Maybe white can try rook a4 on move just on 47.
Yeah, but probably he has to. But let's say king g5.
Ooh, yeah, also nasty. D5.
Because also maybe I have a threat. I have an idea if I can play, let's say, rook h8, rook h1 after king g5, d5, and try to create threats.
Yeah, looks very unpleasant. Could be mate in certain positions.
But general, I have a feeling the worst case scenario, black will get a pawn back, and probably it will be enough for a draw. Of course, white are probing it. They have to try with 2 pawns up, yeah. But objectively, and he has much more time. Yeah, Maxim.
Yeah, 18 minutes for David.
Yeah, for David, maybe what move is it?
40. So 13 more moves before 15 minutes are added. So he's got
not that simple. Not that simple for black, but I do believe that it's closer to a draw than to a win. But of course, it's not that one-sided.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. We'll keep an eye on this game. Well, before we let you go and enjoy the games, maybe I could have your general impressions on the tournament. Do you have a predicted winner, and maybe also your thoughts on Firouzja? I know everybody is always very interested in what the legends think of Ali Reza and his chances to continue his success.
No, I think it's very hard to predict in one tournament. But of course, Ali Reza has enormous potential. He shows it, and he is progressing. The only thing which maybe I'm too, old and conservative, but I think that he's playing too much bullet.
Well, I'm enabling that.
Sorry?
I'm enabling that behavior because a lot of it is against me.
Yes, I know. Because it's a lot of fun and it's a good, big temptation. But, to play classical and they develop different qualities. I will not say it's bad, but for each time control, different qualities are required. And it definitely develops, ability to spot things immediately. But probably an ability to go very deep, it's kind of diminishes. I really don't know. Maybe he plays just with you and, okay, he hopefully works a lot on chess. We can see from his games that he is progressing, constantly progressing.
Right. No, definitely.
But of course, he is, but it's not, I think makes no point to predict how he'll do in this tournament or next tournament.
Right.
He's really on a way up. And generally, my feeling that nowadays it's very hard to judge because, okay, it's a first, maybe second tournament after Stavanger for a long period. But when hopefully chess life will restore to maybe not to full, but we'll have more grounds to judge who of young players made the biggest progress in this lockdown time.
Right. It's testing the work ethic. Well, and the last thing, Boris, we just were informed of the death, tragically, of Grandmaster Lubomir Kovalek, who played many times in Wake Z. I'm sure you've crossed paths with Lubomir. Do you have any experiences with him that you might want to share upon his death?
But do you know what happened with him?
I think that what the information we got was a short but severe illness. That's what's written in the article.
I see. Yeah, because it's really sad day. Less than a year ago, we both were guests of the Prague Chess Festival, and we had a chat with him, and it was always a big pleasure to talk with him, a person with a good sense of humor, with a good knowledge of chess, and a big patient to chess. And I remember that during this Prague, Johann Afek is a great study composer, was showing us his studies, and Lubomir, his mind was very sharp. He was spotting an ideas very quickly. So it's really sad news. I discussed it already with some friends today. It's really sad day because, he was a great chess player. His legacy is big, a lot of great games, but also a very charming and friendly person.
Those are some very touching memories, and definitely thoughts and prayers to Lubomir's family. But Grandmaster Boris Gelfand, absolute legend, world champion contender. Such an honor to have you in the studio. Thank you so much, Boris, for sharing your thoughts and your insights on the games.
Thank you, Daniel, and good luck to you, and good luck to the tournament. I hope it will produce some great games, so all chess fans will enjoy. Like yesterday games between Caruana and Duda was really amazing. I analyzed briefly, but I intend to do it in forthcoming days in more depth. It's really fascinating game.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Boris, and have a great rest of the day. Enjoy the games, and thanks again.
Thank you, Daniel, and bye. Bye.
Hello and welcome back to the final stage of this round 4 here in Wijk aan Zee. But what a pleasure it was to have the legendary Boris Gelfand with us.
Indeed, Boris, he's one of my favorite personalities in chess. He's so, legend is the only word I think even remotely appropriate to describe someone like that, both in terms of his chess acumen and ability, the memories that he has, the stories, and of course his humility and incredible class. He is one of the absolute best chess personalities. I think we can all agree on that. That was awesome.
Incredible and so nice of him to jump on the call. Daniel, let's go back to the games. Is MVL maybe making a little progress here?
Yeah, I mean, MVL found, I think, this idea with D5. And we had to consider, I think Boris actually proposed this, and it certainly is scary. I mean, White has to have nerves of steel to go for something like, because he's lining up all of his rooks on the A, all of his rooks and his bishop, all of his pieces on the A file, and he's kind of leaving his king for the time being to the wolves. And David Anton trying to exploit that, centralizing his own king. But let's not forget, White is up 2 pawns. And speaking of nerves of steel, MVL has them. And I think we should find out a little bit more about the beast from Lyon. We have his portrait ready for consumption.
It's my first time in Wijk aan Zee. I've played in the B section in 2007 and then in the A section as Masters in 2011 and 2015. So it's been quite a while since I've been here. What can be played, what should be played, I mean, there's a lot of things I can do. There's a lot of openings I've been playing in the past few months. So you will see as the tournament unfolds which openings I choose to play. As a chess player, I started to understand that I needed to be fitter. It has paid off already in terms of fitness, but of course there's still a lot of work to do. I think, being fit physically also means you're going to be fit mentally, I mean, unless some personal stuff is happening. Most games I'm not very competitive, if not for chess, but I'm only competitive whenever I have a feeling I can win or I can be on top. Other than that, I don't really care about the competition as much and try more to enjoy. Of course, over the board, it's all about winning and, trying to achieve my goals. Many great competitors who won the event, and I would very much like to be one of them.
MVL, who hadn't been here in Wijk aan Zee since 2015, but it's certainly great to have him back as we see him yawning away there. I mean, it's a grueling tournament.
Grueling.
And I'm sure everyone is looking forward to the first rest day tomorrow.
Indeed. And, exhaustion is hard to hide. And, MVL and together with Duda and others speaking about the importance of fitness. And in light of how grueling these games are, that is absolutely no surprise. The kind of mental fortitude required to maintain a high level throughout hours and hours and hours of this is unthinkable. And of course, mental fortitude cannot be achieved without physical fitness. That connection has been well established. So MVL trying to push a small advantage here against David Anton. And wow, just such a grueling game. And we'll see if he's able to manufacture any chances here.
Yeah, actually, well, here, interestingly enough, if we look at the clock situations, David Anton could find himself in another time pressure situation, because he only has 11 minutes for the remaining 12 moves. They are currently on move 48. So move 60 is the final time control where they get an extra final 15 minutes. And it's actually not so easy here. Still a lot of things to be considered.
Oh, absolutely. And Boris in the interview mentioned that White's king is in some danger. We talked about this before we looked at the portrait. Don't laugh, but he needs to be careful, because if you fall in love with the extra pawns and you maybe go back to c4, you try to protect everything. Already, White can get mated very easily here. Bishop b4 check, and it's checkmate. F3, rook b2. king g3, rook g1, and you're just going to get ladder mated. So I'm not saying MVL is going to do that, but you have to be on your heels. And he goes d6. I think that's a great move. Now he jettisons his pawn. And after king takes d6, the reason he does this is to provide more mobility to his rooks and also to expose the king a little bit. Black's king was hiding behind that pawn. One thing to consider is the move bishop d3 in this position. And that doesn't blunder the bishop. Of course, white reclaims the bishop with rook d4 and rook takes d3. And I would say in a position like this with 4 rooks on the board, white actually has pretty decent winning chances. I don't know if he specifically wants to play bishop d3. I guess we're about to find out. But this does look like a very sensible move.
Yeah, bishop d3 has just appeared.
It has been played. Yeah, that's a great idea by MBL to minimize the risk. Now he's, of course, in no more danger of getting checkmated. And David Anton, it really seems like at some point he was comfortably in the driver's seat, and it would be heartbreaking for him to lose another one of these very narrow endgames. I think his drawing chances still outweigh MVL's winning chances, but this is beginning to look a little bit grim, Fiona.
Yeah, I mean, he did such a brilliant job against Magnus Carlsen the other day, but he's going to have to produce a similar defensive effort here today to hold this game in the balance.
Indeed, and just to recap what happens in the event of this endgame, well, it's not hard to get a read on the situation. White just has an extra a-pawn, and the g-pawn is also weak. So white has all of these threats, rook g3, rook a6, rook g5, and if white wins a second pawn, then the situation gets really dark for MBL. The king on c6 is sort of caught in the crossfire of the rook. That doesn't help at all. And the king on g2, meanwhile, is really safe. That pawn on f2 is sheltering the king from any checks along the second rank, which makes Black's defensive task even harder. So I don't know. This looks very nasty for Black indeed.
Dania, I just saw a really nice comment in the Twitch chat by Pitik Live saying, "These two hosts make me want to learn and play chess. Started yesterday and loving it. It's never too late." Indeed, it's never too late to learn how to play chess and enjoy the game, especially if you're new to it. I know it's quite an advanced level here, but it's so great to have you all with us, and indeed, never too late.
Indeed. Thank you for that comment. That's very sweet. And as David Anton does capture the bishop on d3, we will see on the board this endgame. It might be worth actually going to e6, it occurred to me, in order to lend as much support as you can to that pawn on g6, or by the same token, king e7 also seems possible. We will see what decision David makes, as he's got 10 minutes for about 9 moves. This isn't the most complicated position, but he has to find a defensive construction that's robust. And one final thing that I'll propose before maybe we can switch to the other game is putting the rook on the 6th rank and giving this pawn full support of one of the rooks, keeping the other rook active, and potentially putting that other rook behind the passed pawn. So, apportioning the labor here is very important between the rooks in order to avoid any of these nasty things from coming to fruition. We will see how David defends this. He goes king e6.
Should we go check in with the bishop ending, Alexander Donchenko and Radek Wojtyszek?
Yeah, so we're going to see a draw here. And with Boris, we were calculating the fascinating ramifications of the move bishop f1, and we concluded that this only looks for trouble. After bishop takes h3, c4, white actually wins the game. And there's this amazing line. I can repeat this line. After bishop g2, or let's say bishop takes g4, white plays the move bishop e2. Now, if black takes, then the king is able to stop black's pawns, but black is not able to stop white's pawns. So black must refrain from the trade and then pave the way for his pawn. So you get a pawn race. Actually, first you play bishop d3. That's the key. You stop the bishop from capturing on e4. You get a pawn race, and it seems like black promotes first, but no, white promotes second. Doesn't matter. Black has no checks, and his king is absolute toast. White's queen and bishop is just going to eat that black king alive. So Radek very prudently deciding not to go for this line. Instead, he sort of plays king a3, and we are going to see here a repetition of moves. I think we're going to see bishop d3, bishop a2, and this game is going to conclude in a draw any second. Alexander, of course, despite having the extra pawn, cannot make any progress due to the immense activity of black's pieces, and he does play bishop d3. This game will end in repetition very shortly.
Yeah, let's maybe just stick around with the camera for a second. Alexander has just played bishop d3. I think we might just see a draw right here.
Yep.
Bishop a2. And it looks like the players are repeating.
They are. And bishop b5 by Alexander. We will see a stoppage of the clocks. I'm not going to say a handshake this time. There will be no handshake, but a stoppage of the clocks and a signing of the peace treaty will occur in just one moment. And here comes a 3-time repetition. Radek recording his move and calling over the arbiter. And this one is in the books as well, another draw. And this only leaves Fiona MVL against David Antonis. Maxime trying to be the only one who can strike with a victory before the rest day.
What do you think? What are the odds that Maxime is going to win his game?
Not very high. I mean, the reality is his chances are.
By the way, sorry,
very...
Dania, just can you see the mouth? Can we go back to that camera? I love Alexander Donchenko's mask. It's not really a face mask. It's like a bandana, but he always looks like, I don't know, is it like a cowboy or I don't know. It's just, I find it so funny, and I love that the players are bringing different styles of face masks to the tournament.
Absolutely. And I think before we transition back to MBL's game, do we have another tweet to show?
Yeah, so I saw a tweet during one of our breaks, and thanks for getting in touch. A tweet from Jens Peterson saying, could I explain how the players handle their food situation this year? Since the players and staff are in a COVID-free bubble here at Tata Steel Chess, does that mean that we all eat at the hotel, or does the bubble include our favorite restaurants and for the staff too? So indeed, this year is a very special year in that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And it does indeed mean that all of us, the staff and the players, we all eat at the hotel. So the kitchen is open. But the restaurants, some of our favorite restaurants here in Weichensee, everyone who has been in Weichensee knows the famous Italian restaurant Tarantella. If you've been here, you will have seen all the best players in the world at Tarantella, from Magnus, Carlsen to Jurriaan, and everyone has been there. Dania, I think you have been there as well. They are all thankfully open for takeaway. So we can still get our favorite pizza. Klein Switzerland, for those who have been here, also open for takeaway, as is Zonnebank. So they're open for takeaway, but unfortunately we have to eat the food in the room. And that's the situation.
Very interesting. Sonnebank has the best French onion soup. For some reason, I still remember it.
I miss
Weichensee.
Well.
Yep, and pizzeria, of course. That pizza is absolute killer. Man, so much talk of pizza. I'm gonna make a beeline for something hearty right after the commentary ends. I'm starving. So all this talk of food.
Let's hope MVL, well, I was going to say hopefully they hurry up, but I think the players are in no rush. MVL, if he can get the win, he's going to sit here for another 2 hours if he has to.
Yeah, he will.
Let's go back to his game.
No, this game he's going to take up every second of those 40 minutes trying to win this position. Now, I will say that his chances are quite slim, and the reason is that I just don't see how White's going to make progress, because the moment he starts pushing his pawn, Black can get his rook to a1, and this other rook, just as we discussed, David is positioned it such that it defends the pawn on g6. I just don't see any targets here. There's attempts. He can torture him forever, but I just don't really see it happening, to be honest.
Let's see. We have some super cameras here in the playing hall. Let's see if we can get a close-up of the board and inspect the action. Right. Okay, so we're going in inch by inch, and here we are.
There we go. Zooming in.
And we're zooming in even more.
Uh-oh. And are we zooming in even more? Oh. Nice, nice, nice.
Those cameras, I mean, that's pretty impressive.
I know. Look at that. Is just, you don't get that every day. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's just high-tech stuff right there.
I hope DGT paid us well for this product placement.
Wow. And look at wow, that is Black King. Incredible. And zooming back out now, I'm laughing, but it's actually really cool. Yep, you can see the dust particles on the board. That is the kind of definition and the zoom quality on these cameras.
It's incredible. Technology is, what can I say? Technology is impressive, Daniel.
It really is. It really is. As David ponders where to put that king of his, which is in check. And we think that he will put it on G7. Riveting endgame here between Emil and David Anton.
Okay, let's see in the chat. What do people think? How is this game going to end? Let us know your thoughts. I'll ask you as well, Dania, in terms of percentage, what are the chances this is going to end in a draw, and what are the chances MVL is going to squeeze out a win?
I'm going to give it like 80% chance of a draw, especially because when move 60 arrives, he's going to get 15 more minutes, which is not actually that much time. But the thing is, like, he doesn't have to make that many decisions. It's not like one of those positions where MVL has like 5 different tries and, you can try this, that, and the other thing. At some point, MVL is going to have to start pushing his pawn. David Anton, as I explained, will put his rook behind it. And you'll get a situation like this. And maybe if MVL can try to push this pawn through to a6, somehow to a7, you can try to use checks against Black's king. That's where the 20% comes from. But David, given his defense against Magnus, I do have confidence in his ability to save this position and to make that draw.
And looking at the chat, I think they are even giving it more than an 80%. I barely saw any MVL win votes in there, so looks like we are all expecting a draw, meaning everyone is gonna go into the rest day.
No, it's gonna be a draw.
Nobody is gonna go into the rest day feeling entirely miserable.
Indeed, and that would be all draws, but so many combative games today, and we've had our fun, that's for sure. So, and that's understandable. The players will eat in peace. They will not be angry. They'll take a deep breath. Everyone's on the board, and as we see David step away to G7 with this game. Yeah, and MVL. Okay, so let's see. How can we? I guess the only winning plan is to mobilize the A pawn. Yeah, but there's nothing. There's really nothing. Zero. I mean, because after A4, I wouldn't say he will offer a draw. I would do something like this, put the rook on F4, just try to stop Black from winning the pawn with rook B4. But David, what he can do is he can go rook A2. He can also tie himself to this pawn. And the biggest issue is, let's say that White goes rook A7 and A5. Black just goes rook B5. And after A6, rook B6, it's already a draw because the pawn is lost. There's just nothing to be done here at all. And it's only a matter of David finding the right placements for his rooks. And as he ponders that, I believe that we have an interview with the one and only Anish Giri. That's correct. I'm correct. That is correct.
Anish, without really knowing what was going on, I told some reporter that you had sort of to fight for a draw. Was that correct?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It was a theoretical variation. I think until very far it was all played before. At least that's what I thought. At least that's what I knew. And then I had a choice to keep the queens on the board because I have compensation for the pawn. I'm pawn down, but I have 2 bishops. First, I was planning to keep the queens on the board, and I was not sure if my compensation is good enough to play for more than equality or not. And I was choosing a lot and double guessing there. But finally, I decided to trade the queens, and then I am playing just for equality. I don't think I was ever in great danger. I think the safety margin is enormous in such positions. But it was an interesting choice before to keep the queens or not. Decided to take the easy route here.
Okay, and now tomorrow is the first rest day. Are you satisfied with your play so far?
Yeah, the rest day is very welcome because in my last few tournaments I usually play around 3 days long. So this is already today is the 4th day. I'm feeling feeling the heat. So rest day is great. So far, the play is okay. Yeah, I honestly was hoping to get chances yesterday, but I really didn't get any. I was actually only, I was on the worst side for the most part of the game, so didn't really get chances. I must say that a lot is about getting chances in modern chess. Everybody's well prepared. It's very hard.
And you already got used to the new conditions here, I can say.
Yeah, no, it was fine. I was at first a little bit concerned that, this will be very empty and silent and it would feel lonely. But, once the game starts, actually, I'm so focused and I have so many problems to solve that it doesn't seem to be an issue at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anish Giri looking forward to the first rest day, as I think we all do. I mean, it's a good thing. I think without the 3 rest days, it might seem like a lot to people watching the tournament from afar. Like, why can't we watch any chess today? Why is there yet another rest day? But when you're here playing, it's a different story.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we've transmitted some of the reasons behind that. I mean, if there are no rest days, the players would literally collapse from exhaustion, and so would we, because there's just so much going on every day, and the players, you might have one game, don't they get a chance to rest after the game? Well, they do, but it's not enough, and that extra day of full sleep, fully unplug, that is just absolutely necessary to keep their energy levels at least reasonably high.
Yeah, and I'm curious this year what not much is gonna be done on the rest day here in Vik. Well, we're still in a pandemic. Everything is closed. Most players are still in during their quarantine. Actually, I think the quarantine for most players will end on the 23rd. So even if we wanted to go somewhere, we wouldn't be allowed. And yeah, MVL, he is probably tired, but even more than the tiredness, he wants to try and see if he can squeeze something out. There was a poll in the chat, and 68 people still believe that MVL can win the game. Or is going to win the game.
That's interesting because, well, one thing to notice here, King G3 would threaten checkmate. Just kind of funny, but David has seen that, and that represents my mental state at the moment. And Rook F6, I think, is the saving move here, opening up that F5 square for the king. So you can still give a check. That's your king F5. You can even trade rooks, but if you look at how awkward White's pieces are, he's just going to end up losing that pawn. And even if he doesn't, this is still a dead draw. So I would put some faith into David's defensive capabilities here. Probably Maxime is going to end up playing A4. But after Rook A2, he's very likely to lose that pawn. Time control is almost at hand, so David will get those additional 15 minutes to make sure that he can retain his precision as he tries to round this effort off.
Yeah, I think here, well, he only has 3 more moves to make. I think there shouldn't be too many problems making this final time control. And I agree with you. I think he's already shown, I think the endgame against Magnus, he was under a lot more pressure than he is here. He did great then, and I don't think we're going to see a collapse from David Anton here.
No, unless there's some sort of a crazy blunder. And one idea that occurred to me is to go Rook to A3. And you're hoping that Black goes Rook F6 and tries to trade rooks. And the rook swings back to G3, and the rook is lost, King F5, Rook F3. But this is all pipe dreams. David will not blunder such a thing. He can just go Rook B5. I mean, maybe Rook B5 is inaccurate. So there are some issues, but I'm sure that David will solve them successfully. And as he does, let us remind everybody of the results today. Well, they are not hard to recap, are they, Fiona? Because there's only one type of results.
They are not. And actually, after that, we're probably not going to stick around until the end because there's so much more chess action tonight. Yeah. Title Tuesday just started 15 minutes ago. We'll send you guys there in a sec. But yeah, the results, they have all ended peacefully. That does not mean the games were uneventful. Far from it. Especially if you haven't seen them, you're just tuning in now, make sure to check out the game between Ariane Tari and Alireza Firouzja. Lots and lots and lots of fireworks. And our prediction is that this last game between MVL and David Anton is going to end in a draw as well. Then next up, we're going to remind you of the schedule. Tomorrow, if you tune in at 2 o'clock, you're not going to find us because it is a rest day, the first of 3 rest days. Dania and myself will be back on the 21st. I actually need to go to my laptop to see what day that is. That is Thursday. So 2 days from now is Thursday. We'll be back at 2 p.m. Central European time, which is the local time here in Weichensee. And we'll be with you 2 more rounds, round 5 and round 6. After that, we have a switch up in commentary teams. Round 7, you will have Tex David and Simon Williams, the Ginger GM. And finally, the last 6 rounds of the event, You'll have Sopiko Guramishvili and Mr. Robert has so lots more to look forward to. And Dania, before we end the show, let's just look at the pairings for the round after the rest day.
Absolutely. Let's see who plays who, as the logjam at the top that was formed at the end of the last round remains at the end of this round. So the pairings are going to define a lot here. We can see Carlsen playing Donchenko. That's a game that Magnus is definitely going to try to win. Fabi, same here with Esipenko. Grandelius against vachier-lagrave.
Did you notice that they swapped flags?
That's hilarious. But yeah, American Grandmaster Niels Grandelius and Swedish Grandmaster Fabiano Caruana playing Esipenko. And Firouzja Van Forest, that is a mouth-watering match that we will look forward to as the youngsters take on each other, both in very good form. We will be keeping a close eye on that game. That will be coming your way once again, not tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow.
Absolutely, and we are going to end this show here. Once again, a big thank you to all of you guys who watched us throughout the day. Dania, thank you, and enjoy your rest day, as
Likewise.
well as all of you guys watching us. And I think we're going to send you over to the coverage of Title Tuesday. So lots more chess, as I said, to look forward to. Have a good one. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.